Near midnight on a frozen mountain highway, a little girl stood barefoot on black ice, 6 years old, alone, wearing a man's oversized green coat that swallowed her whole. No tears, no screaming, just silence so complete it cut through the wind like a blade. Cole Vance saw her from 40 feet away and felt his chest cave in. Not from fear, from recognition. He'd seen that look before, on the faces of people who had already decided no one was coming. The diner's neon sign bled red across the snow. The girl didn't move, didn't blink. She wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was waiting to disappear. And the man on the Harley, the one with 11 years of nightmares stitched into his skin, was the only thing standing between her and the dark. If this story already has its hooks in you, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Subscribe to this channel and follow every chapter to the end, because the stories we tell here don't let go easily. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city and country. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The temperature had been dropping since sundown, and by the time Cole Vance crossed the ridge above Harlan Pass, the thermometer bolted to his handlebar read 11 degrees. Not wind chill. 11 degrees flat, and the wind hadn't stopped since Wyoming. His fingers had gone numb inside his riding gloves somewhere around mile marker 40, and he hadn't bothered to stop because stopping meant thinking, and thinking was the one thing he'd spent 3 years and 16,000 highway miles learning to avoid. The Harley beneath him was a 2009 Road King, black on black, the chrome stripped off years ago because chrome caught light, and Cole didn't want anything about himself catching light anymore. The exhaust was loud in the way that mattered, not performative, not show-off loud, but the deep mechanical growl of something built for distance, not display. The bike had 112,000 miles on it. So did the man. He spotted the diner from the crest of the hill, a single-story box of light squatting beside the highway, the kind of place that existed only because the highway had no choice but to pass by it. The sign above the door read, Harlan's in red neon, the apostrophe long since burned out. The parking lot held 3 vehicles, a salt-eaten pickup, a state contractor's van, and a sedan with 1 headlight. Cole downshifted. The engine's voice dropped half an octave. He wasn't planning to stop. He never planned anything anymore. But his body made the decision before his mind could argue, and he pulled off the highway and let the Harley idle into the lot like it knew the way. He killed the engine. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was the particular hush of high-elevation winter, wind in the tree line, the creak of the diner's fascia board, the distant crack of ice contracting on the mountain. Cole sat on the bike for a moment with his helmet resting on the tank, just breathing. His breath came out white and fast, and he watched it dissolve and tried not to think about what it meant that watching his own breath dissolve had become the most honest part of his day. That was when he saw her. She was standing at the far edge of the parking lot, right where the asphalt met the gravel strip, and the gravel strip met the darkness. Barefoot. The cold had to be eating through the soles of her feet like acid, but she wasn't dancing or hopping or doing any of the things a cold child does. She was absolutely still. She wore a coat that was clearly not hers, adult-sized, dark green, synthetic fill, with the sleeves rolled up multiple times and still hanging past her hands. Her hair was dark and tangled, and she was staring out into the black tree line across the highway with the focused stillness of someone listening for a specific sound in a lot of noise. She was maybe 6 years old. Cole didn't move for a full 10 seconds. He ran the calculations the way his training had taught him. Threat assessment, environmental scan, secondary players. The parking lot was otherwise empty. The highway was empty in both directions. The diner's windows glowed warm and yellow, but nobody was looking out. She was alone. She had been alone long enough that her feet had to be past pain by now, which meant she'd been out here longer than the situation had any right to allow. Every muscle in his body told him to get off the bike and go to her immediately. He ignored every muscle in his body. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way you move around something wild that hasn't decided yet whether you're safe. He swung off the bike and set his helmet on the seat, and he walked maybe 10 feet toward her and then stopped. He didn't call out. He didn't announce himself. He just stood there in the cold, at a distance that gave her options. And he waited. She became aware of him after a moment. He could see the moment her peripheral vision registered a shape. Her whole body changed, shoulders pulling in, chin dropping, the coat swallowing her a little more as some instinct drew her smaller. It was the movement of a child who had learned very recently and very thoroughly that adult attention was a danger to be survived, not a comfort to be welcomed. Cole lowered himself slowly to one knee on the frozen asphalt. His knee joints protested. He was 38, and 3 years of sleeping on cots and hard ground, and the occasional concrete floor had not been kind to the cartilage. But he got down there, and now he was eye level. Less eye level, actually, because she was small even for her age, and he pulled off his left riding glove, reached down, and laid his leather jacket on the icy pavement between them. Not toward her. Not offered. Just placed, like something left for someone to find or ignore as they chose. The girl looked at the jacket, then she looked at him. Her eyes were dark and very old in the way some children's eyes get old before the rest of them has a chance to catch up. Cole said nothing. He had learned, in 11 years of military rescue operations in places that had no names on civilian maps, that silence was sometimes the only language that didn't threaten. Words could lie. Words could coax and manipulate and promise things that never came. But a man kneeling in the cold on a frozen parking lot, not moving, not reaching, not demanding, that was a statement that took longer to manufacture than most people had patience for, and therefore it carried a different kind of weight. She moved in stages. Toe first, one careful step, then a stop, another step. She reached the jacket without looking away from him, and she crouched and touched it with one hand, the fabric between her fingers. Her feet on the asphalt made no sound. Cole could see her toes now, and they were red going to white, which meant the capillaries were shutting down, which meant she needed to be inside in the next few minutes, or the conversation was going to become a medical emergency. "There's heat in there," he said. He nodded toward the diner, one slight movement. "Coffee. Probably pie if you want it." She studied him the way a small animal studies a gap in a fence, not with trust, but with the calculation of something that has learned to weigh every available option very carefully. "I'm waiting," she said. Her voice was soft and worn at the edges, the voice of a child who had been crying recently, but not right now. "For someone." "Okay," Cole said. "I'll wait with you." Her eyes narrowed slightly. That wasn't the answer she'd expected. People who found unattended children in parking lots at midnight had a script, and "I'll wait with you" wasn't in it. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," he said. They looked at each other across the few feet, and the jacket on the pavement, and the cold that was becoming something serious, and then she picked up the jacket. She couldn't wrap it around herself without help, so she clutched it to her front like a shield, and she walked past him toward the diner door. Cole stood up slowly, his knee cracking loud enough that she glanced back at him. He shrugged. She didn't quite smile, but something in her face shifted a fraction of a degree toward something that wasn't fear, and he filed that away as the most significant thing that had happened to him in a very long time. Inside, the diner smelled of burned coffee and something baking and the particular damp warmth of a space heater working too hard in a room with poor insulation. A woman in her 50s with a gray braid and a laminated name tag reading Dottie stood behind the counter and looked at the two of them. The big man with the weathered face and the road dust still on his jacket, and the small girl with the bare red feet clutching his leather jacket. And something in Dottie's face went through a quiet reorganization. "Honey," she said, addressing the girl directly, "let me get you some socks." It was the right instinct and the right tone, and Cole was grateful for both. He guided the girl to a booth at the back, away from the windows, facing the door, old habit, and slid in across from her. Dottie reappeared with a pair of men's wool hiking socks that were clearly from her own bag, and she helped the girl pull them on with the practical, no-nonsense competence of someone who had raised children and wasn't going to make a fuss about it. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Dottie asked. The girl looked at Cole first, just a flicker of a look, but Cole caught it. She was checking something, checking whether his face changed when Dottie asked the question, whether his expression went toward anticipation or urgency or the particular leaning in that adults did when they wanted something from you. His face didn't change. "Lily," the girl said. Lily Harper. Are you hungry, Lily Harper? Lily looked at the laminated menu on the table with an expression that was very careful. Is it expensive? Dottie looked at Cole. Cole said, order what you want. Lily ordered scrambled eggs and toast. Cole ordered black coffee and didn't drink it. They sat in silence while the kitchen made noise in the back. The two other customers in the diner, a trucker at the counter and an older couple in the opposite booth, had glanced over once and returned to their own business. Dottie moved between the counter and the back with the studied casualness of someone paying close attention while appearing not to. You said someone was coming back, Cole said finally. Not a question exactly, more like acknowledgement. Lily's eyes dropped to the table. He said he would. How long ago? She thought about it. Before dark? Cole didn't say anything. Before dark on this highway in December meant before 4:30. It was 11:40. Cole did the math and kept his face even, but something behind his sternum turned to stone. Does this person have a name? She hesitated. He said not to tell people about him. Okay. He said if I talked to strangers, it would make things harder. Cole picked up the coffee cup, set it down. Does he have a car? A gray one, she paused, with a crack in the back window. He filed that away. The sedan in the parking lot had one headlight and he hadn't gotten a good look at the rear window. He made a mental note to check it before it left. Lily's food arrived and she ate with the focused efficiency of a child who had learned not to waste time between when food appeared and when food might disappear. Not frantically, not messily, but with the attention to the process that you didn't see in children who'd always had enough. Cole watched without appearing to watch and felt something that he recognized from his worst deployments, the specific cold anger that rose in him when the evidence was impossible to argue with. He excused himself, told Lily he was stepping outside for a moment, and stepped outside. He walked to the sedan first. The rear window had a horizontal crack starting from the lower left corner. He memorized the plate number and the time it took him to walk past it. Then he walked to the edge of the lot where Lily had been standing, crouched down, and examined the ground. No footprints other than hers in the dusting of snow that had settled on the gravel. She'd been standing in one spot for a very long time. And there, at the edge of the gravel, was a small backpack, dark blue, child-sized, that had been set down carefully rather than dropped. He picked it up and felt the weight of it. Not heavy, not empty. He didn't open it. That wasn't his call, not yet. He brought it inside and set it on the table beside Lily, and she looked at it and then looked at him, and something in that look told him she was surprised he hadn't looked through it while he was outside. That's mine, she said. I know, he said. I figured you'd want it. She pulled it to her side of the table and held the strap with both hands, not opening it, just holding it, like it was the one thing she was sure about. Cole went to the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled out his phone. The contact he needed was listed under the name Dutch, and the number had a 307 area code, Wyoming. Cole had 3 bars of signal, which was a minor miracle in the mountains, and he made the call standing at the sink with the water running so the sound of his voice wouldn't carry. Dutch picked up on the second ring. This was not surprising. Dutch had a particular relationship with sleep that could most charitably be described as adversarial. Brother! Dutch's voice was the texture of gravel in a tin can. Former Marine, 52 years old, ran a machine shop in Casper. He had a prosthetic left hand, a purple heart, and zero tolerance for the kind of people who put barefoot children in parking lots in winter. I need your brain, Cole said. Where are you? Harlan's Diner, County Route 9, above the pass. A brief pause. How bad? Cole didn't answer immediately. Dutch had known him for 19 years, which meant Dutch understood that the length of the silence was itself an answer. 6-year-old girl, Cole said, barefoot, abandoned in the parking lot, claims someone's coming back. He's been gone since before dark. So 7 hours. At least. Another pause. She give you a name? Lily Harper. I don't know if that's real. What else? Backpack, sedan in the lot, cracked rear window. I've got the plate. She's scared of the wrong things. He stopped. Then, she checked my face when the waitress asked her name. She was reading whether I wanted something from her. Dutch said nothing for 3 seconds. In 19 years, Cole had learned that Dutch's silences had different textures, and this one was the texture of controlled anger, settling into purpose. "I'm calling Reyes," Dutch said. "Don't bring everyone at once. 2 bikes, no noise. We'll be there in 40. Cole hung up. He looked at himself in the mirror for a moment. He looked like what he was. A man who'd been riding hard roads for too long, who'd been sleeping badly for 11 years, who had a particular scar running from his left ear to his jawline that occasionally still burned when the temperature dropped below 15 degrees. He looked like someone the world had used in ways the world preferred not to discuss. He also looked, he thought, like someone who had made a decision. He went back to the booth. Lily had finished her eggs and was sitting very still with her hands in her lap and the backpack strap looped around her wrist. She looked at him when he sat down, and something in her expression asked a question that her mouth didn't form. "Some friends of mine are coming," he said. "They're going to sit with us." "Are they police?" "No." She considered this. "Are they like you?" Cole thought about Dutch, who had lost 3 fingers and a full hand in Fallujah, and come home and started a machine shop and raised 2 daughters alone after his wife left, and who had never once in Cole's memory done the thing that was easy instead of the thing that was right. He thought about Reyes, who had a master's degree in engineering and a sealed military record, and who fixed motorcycles with the same precision he'd once used to defuse the kind of ordnance that ended sentences permanently. He thought about the rest of the iron-bound brotherhood, men who had come home from wars that nobody had clean names for and found that the world they'd left hadn't saved them a place, and so they'd built their own. "Yeah," he said, "they're like me." Lily nodded once, slowly, and looked back down at her hands. "Okay," she said. The next 40 minutes were quiet in a way that wasn't entirely comfortable. Dottie refilled Cole's coffee twice without him asking. Lily sat with her backpack and looked at the table and occasionally looked at the window that faced the parking lot. Cole noticed the looking. Each time a vehicle moved on the highway outside, her posture changed in a small specific way. A millimeter of tension through the shoulders, a very slight tightening of her grip on the backpack strap. And then, when the vehicle passed without turning in, she released it. She was watching for the gray car. She was watching for it with something that was not hope. Cole had spent enough time in situations where the complexity was human and the variables were people to recognize the specific combination of longing and dread that appeared in a person's body when they were waiting for someone they had complicated feelings about. He'd seen it in hostage situations, in extraction missions that had started clean and gotten tangled. He'd seen it in the face of a young sergeant in Kandahar who had received word that his father was coming to visit, and had spent 3 days moving through the camp with the expression of a man walking towards something he couldn't outrun. Lily Harper had that expression. She was waiting for someone who made her feel safe and afraid at the same time, and that specific combination was the most dangerous kind. Cole was still thinking about this when headlights swung across the window, not from the highway, from the far end of the parking lot. Someone who had pulled in slowly, without the casual speed of a customer arriving for late coffee. The headlights swept the lot in a way that was deliberately methodical, like someone looking for something specific, and then they stopped. The vehicle sat at the far end with the engine running, and Cole couldn't see the make or color clearly from inside. He looked at Lily. Her face had gone the color of the wall behind her. "Is that him?" Cole asked quietly. She didn't answer. She was staring at the window with both hands flat on the table and the backpack clutched to her chest, and she was breathing very carefully in the way people breathe when they're trying not to be heard. Cole stood up. He didn't move toward the window. He moved to Dottie at the counter. "The vehicle at the far end of the lot," he said, low. "Don't go outside. Don't make it obvious you see it." Dottie looked at him with the measured steadiness of a woman who'd run a diner on a mountain highway for 20 years, and had seen the whole spectrum of human emergency. "Should I call the sheriff?" "Yes," he said. "Tell them a minor is involved. Tell them it's not urgent. I need them calm, not fast." "Can you do that?" "I can do that." He went back to the booth. Lily hadn't moved. Her eyes tracked him the way scared animals track movement, not with intelligence, but with the automatic instinct of something that has identified a possible exit. "Hey," he said. He sat. He didn't touch her. "Look at me." She looked at him. "Nobody is coming in here to get you," he said. "You understand? That is not what is happening right now." He said. She stopped. Her throat worked. He said, "If I told anybody, things would get worse." Cole kept his voice exactly level. "Who said that?" She looked at the window, at the headlights still sitting in the far lot, then back at Cole, and in her expression was the particular fragile calculation of a child who had been given a rule to follow and was trying to decide whether the person in front of them was worth the cost of breaking it. "His name is Gerald," she whispered. Outside, the headlights didn't move for another 45 seconds. Then, without drama, without acceleration, the vehicle backed out of the lot and pulled quietly onto the highway and was gone. No rush, no spin of tires, just a slow, deliberate departure in the direction the car had come from. Cole had memorized the plate when the vehicle backed up and the rear lights illuminated the numbers. He looked at his phone under the table and typed it. Not the same plate as the sedan still sitting in the lot. 2 vehicles. He looked at Lily. She was still staring at the spot where the headlights had been, and her expression had shifted from dread to something more specific and more complicated. The expression of someone who had just understood something they'd been trying not to understand. "He saw the police," she said. Her voice was very small. "He drove away because he saw them." Cole said nothing. "He wasn't coming in," she said. She wasn't talking to him now. She was talking to herself, working through something that had cracked. He was just checking. The door opened and a cold gust of December came with it, and Dutch walked in with Reyes behind him. 2 large men in dark riding gear moving with the particular quiet economy of people who had learned in very specific schools that drawing attention was a liability. Dutch had his left hand in his jacket pocket, the prosthetic tucked away, which was how he operated in situations where he needed people to read him fast. Reyes had his helmet under his arm and was already scanning the room, exits, occupants, threat vectors, in the half-second between the door closing and his boots touching the floor. They saw Cole. They saw Lily. Dutch's expression didn't change in any visible way, but something shifted behind his eyes that Cole had seen before and that he would have struggled to describe to anyone who hadn't spent years learning to read that face. They came to the booth without being asked and sat, Dutch on Cole's side, Reyes pulling a chair to the end of the table so that Lily had the full bench to herself. Not boxing her in, not trapping her, creating a perimeter that had her inside it without making her feel like a target. Lily looked at them with the careful assessment of a child who had been given reasons to distrust large men and was recalibrating in real time. Dutch looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the table. He said very conversationally, "That pie good?" Lily blinked. "I didn't have pie." "Huh." Dutch looked at Cole. "The eggs?" "She said they were fine," Cole said. "Dottie's eggs are fine," Dutch said to Lily. "The hash browns are better. You want hash browns?" Lily looked at him for a long moment. Whatever she saw in Dutch's face, and Cole didn't know what she saw because Dutch's face at its most strategic was one of the least readable things he'd encountered in 38 years of living, seemed to pass some threshold of acceptable. Her shoulders dropped a half-inch. "Maybe," she said. Dutch lifted 2 fingers in Dottie's direction without turning around. Dottie, who had the spatial awareness of someone who'd run a counter for 2 decades, nodded from across the room. Reyes had been quiet since entering, which was normal for Reyes. He had opened a notebook, actual paper, actual pen. The man was constitutionally opposed to leaving electronic traces. And he said to Cole, very quietly, "Plates?" Cole slid his phone across the table. Reyes looked at both numbers, wrote them down, put the phone back. His expression was the expression of a man running parallel calculations in the background while the foreground conversation continued. "The backpack," Cole said. "She's been holding it since I brought it inside." Reyes glanced at it, at Lily. "It's hers. She hasn't opened it." Reyes said nothing. Then, "Anything specific in there?" "Don't know." Lily had been listening to this exchange with the focused attention of a child who was significantly more intelligent than adults tended to credit, and Cole had been aware of this throughout. He didn't try to have the conversation in code. In his experience, children who'd been in serious danger were very good at detecting when adults were talking around them, and it made them distrust the adults rather than protecting them from the content. "There's stuff in there," Lily said. They looked at her. "He gave me stuff to carry," she said. "He said it was important." She paused. "I looked once. There's an envelope." Colin, Dutch, and Reyes looked at each other in the way that people who have known each other through serious situations look at each other, a rapid exchange of information that operated below the level of words. "You don't have to show us," Cole said to Lily. "That's your bag." She was quiet for a moment. The hash browns arrived. She looked at them and then at the backpack in her lap. "The envelope had my picture on it," she said carefully, "but it said a different name." Cole kept breathing, kept his face level. "What name did it say?" he asked. She looked at him. In her dark eyes was the exhaustion of a child who had been carrying something too heavy for too long, and the very specific caution of someone who has learned that telling the truth is sometimes more dangerous than keeping it. "Emma," she said. It said Emma Voss. The name landed in the silence of the diner, and Dutch's hand stopped moving toward his coffee cup, and Reyes's pen stopped on the paper, and Dottie, 15 feet away at the counter, went still in the particular way of someone who has overheard something they understand immediately to be significant. Cole looked at the little girl across the table, at the dark tangled hair, and the too big coat, and the men's wool socks, and the bare raw cold of what she'd been carrying, and he felt something move through him that wasn't anger, not exactly, and wasn't grief, though it was close to both. It was more like the specific moment when the shape of something reveals itself completely, when the details that didn't quite cohere suddenly lock into pattern, and what you see is so much worse than what you were prepared for that the body registers it as physical impact. Emma Voss. He knew that name. He didn't know why he knew it, not immediately, but his mind was already reaching, some fragment from a news cycle 6 months ago, a year ago, a face on a flyer, a mention that had filtered through at a rest stop or a truck stop television set, or a conversation overheard in a bar in Wyoming or Colorado, the specific frequency with which a missing child's name gets repeated until it becomes ambient noise. He looked at Reyes. Reyes was already looking at his phone, and Cole could see from the small change in his expression that Reyes had found the same thing Cole's memory was reaching for. Reyes set the phone face down on the table. He looked at Cole. In his eyes was the answer to the question Cole hadn't asked yet. Emma Voss had been missing for 11 months, and whoever had her, this man named Gerald, with his gray car and his cracked rear window and his instructions about not telling people, had just driven away from a parking lot when he'd seen police lights, which meant he'd done the math very quickly on what a sheriff's arrival might mean, and had decided the math didn't favor him. He had left her here on purpose, and then he'd come back to check whether she was still manageable. Cole looked at Lily, at Emma, and made himself hold the weight of what that meant. Outside the diner windows, the December wind moved through the tree line, and somewhere up the mountain road, a pair of headlights was making its way toward the highway, and the dark. But that wasn't the thing that tightened in Cole's chest right now. What tightened in his chest was something else entirely. A memory that lived at the bottom of 11 years of highway miles and sleepless nights, and the particular blue hour before dawn when the brain stopped pretending and showed you what it had been keeping. He'd been 27. Reconnaissance specialist, forward deployed, a village in a province whose name never made it into any report that anyone in a comfortable office ever read. There had been a child, a girl, maybe 8, maybe 9, and there had been a situation moving too fast, and Cole had made a call that was operationally correct and humanly catastrophic, and the girl had not been there when they came back, and he had never found out what happened to her, and he had spent 11 years not finding out because not finding out was the only way to keep moving. He looked at Emma Voss, 6 years old in a green coat with a backpack and a different name, and the eyes of someone who'd seen too much, and he understood very clearly that the universe had a specific kind of cruelty that sometimes also functioned as an invitation. He was done riding past things. He looked at Dutch. Dutch looked back at him. Neither of them said anything for a moment, and then Dutch gave one slow nod. The particular nod that between them had never meant okay, and had always meant, I'm with you. Cole looked at Emma. I'm going to stay right here, he said. Whatever happens tonight, you don't move without me. Understood? She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, the wind hit the window and the neon sign above the door flickered once and held. Somewhere in the distance, though none of them could hear it yet, the sound of more engines was building. Dutch had made calls, and the iron-bound brotherhood did not arrive in ones and twos when it mattered. Okay, Emma said. And then her hands, which had been holding the backpack strap with both fists since she'd walked into the diner, released it, slowly, finger by finger, and she set it on the table between them, like an offering, like a decision. Cole looked at the backpack, at the small hands that had just let go of it, at the child across from him who had been carrying someone else's secrets in the dark for nearly a year and had chosen, in this moment, to set them down. He didn't open it yet. He wasn't going to open it without her permission, and she hadn't given that yet. But what she had given him was something more complicated and more important, the look of a person who had decided, against every lesson their recent life had taught them, to try trusting one more time. And outside, on the highway above Harlan Pass, a gray car with a cracked rear window was driving away through the snow. Not toward home, Cole was certain. Not toward anything as simple as retreat. It was moving with the patient purposefulness of something that would be back, something that had left inventory behind and would return to collect it. The backpack sat on the table between them, and whatever was inside it, the envelope, the photograph, the other name, was about to change everything. The backpack sat on the table between them, and nobody touched it. That was the first thing Cole noticed, how the three of them, Dutch and Reyes and himself, all instinctively left it alone, as if the object itself had weight beyond its physical dimensions. Emma's hands were in her lap now, fingers interlaced, and she was looking at the backpack with an expression that Cole couldn't read cleanly. It wasn't reluctance exactly. It was more like the look of someone standing at the edge of something they'd been walking toward for a long time, who had arrived and found that arrival felt nothing like they'd imagined. You don't have to do this tonight, Cole said. I know, she said, but you want to. She looked at him. I want somebody to know, she said. I'm tired of being the only one who knows. That sentence hit the table like a stone dropped from a height. Dutch looked at his coffee. Reyes set his pen down with a care that was entirely out of proportion to the object. Cole said, Then show us when you're ready. She was ready in about 30 seconds. She unzipped the backpack slowly, the zipper loud in the quiet of the diner, and she reached inside and pulled out a manila envelope that had been folded twice to fit. It was sealed with packing tape, not the original adhesive, which had been broken and resealed, and someone had written on the front in a handwriting that was urgent and irregular, the letters pressed too hard into the paper. Cole could read it from across the table. It said, For anyone who will listen, please. Emma pushed it across the table to him. I didn't read it, she said, just the outside. Cole picked it up. He looked at it for a moment. The handwriting on the front was a woman's, he thought. Not because of any inherent quality of femininity in the letters, but because of something in the specific pressure pattern, the way the plea was written in full and without abbreviation, as though the person writing it understood they might only get to say this once and wanted to say it completely. He looked at Emma. Do you know who wrote this? She nodded. Your mom? A pause. Then another nod, smaller. Cole opened the envelope. Inside were three things. A handwritten letter, 2 pages, both sides covered in the same urgent handwriting. A photograph, a school photo, the kind with the blue gradient background, showing a small girl with dark hair and a gap between her front teeth, smiling the specific smile children produce for school photographers, which is to say a smile that is technically correct and contains almost no warmth. Below the photo, someone had written Emmeline Voss, age 5, March. And a folded document, a single page, official-looking, with a county seal in the upper left corner. Cole read the letter first. He read it twice. The second time he read it with his jaw set and his breathing very controlled and his hands absolutely still on the paper, because the alternative was to let what he was reading move through him in real time, and he wasn't going to do that here, not in front of Emma, not in front of anyone. He passed it to Dutch without a word. Dutch read it. His prosthetic hand was on the table. the carbon fiber fingers resting flat, and Cole watched Dutch's right hand, the one with feeling, tighten slowly around the coffee cup as he read until Cole was briefly concerned about the structural integrity of the ceramic. Dutch passed it to Reyes. Reyes read it with the stillness of a man who had diffused explosive devices in very small spaces and had learned to contain his physical responses as a survival mechanism. When he finished, he folded it precisely along its original creases, slid it back into the envelope, and set it on the table. Then he looked at Cole. "How long has she been with Pruitt?" Reyes asked. His voice was completely even. "The letter says 11 months, Cole said. "And the mother?" "She doesn't say where she is. She says she had to disappear, or he'd use her to control Emma." He paused. "She says she left this with Emma because she knew she couldn't get her out herself. She says—" He stopped. "What?" Dutch said. Cole looked at Emma, who was watching all three of them with the focused attention of someone reading a room, and he chose his words. "She says she left instructions for whoever found Emma to protect her, because she knew Emma would end up somewhere unsafe, and she needed someone on the outside to know the truth." Dutch said nothing for a long moment. Then, "She used her own kid as a message in a bottle." "She didn't have another option," Cole said. "I know that," Dutch said, and his voice was not accusatory. It was the voice of a man absorbing something difficult and honest. "Doesn't make it easier to hear." Emma was looking at Dutch. "My mom is smart," she said. There was something in her voice that was not quite defensive. It was more precise than that. It was the statement of someone correcting a record. Dutch looked at her directly. "Yeah," he said. "She clearly is." The official document was a foster placement authorization. It bore the name Gerald Allen Pruitt as the designated placement guardian. It bore county seals and official signatures, and in the corner, in the same urgent handwriting as the envelope, Emma's mother had written 4 words. "This is all lies." Reyes photographed every page with his phone before anything else happened. Cole watched him do it with the methodical precision of someone who had done field documentation before and understood that paper was fragile and situations moved fast. "We need a name," Reyes said, meaning a legal contact. "Not tonight," Cole said. "Tonight," Reyes said. Not a challenge, a correction. If Pruitt knows she's here, he knows she's with people. If he has connections inside the county system, and that document suggests he does, he can have a deputy at this door in 2 hours with a legal basis for transfer. Cole looked at the document, looked at Emma, looked back at Reyes. "Tonight," he agreed. Reyes made a call. He walked to the far end of the diner near the kitchen hallway, and Cole could hear the low cadence of his voice, but not the words, and that was intentional. Dutch remained at the table. Emma had pulled the photograph from the envelope and was looking at it, at the school photo version of herself with the gap-toothed smile, with an expression that Cole found almost unbearable to observe. It was the expression of someone looking at evidence that they had once been a different person. "That's you," Dutch said. "From before," she said. "How old are you now?" 6. She looked at him. "I had a birthday. Gerald didn't do anything for it." Dutch nodded once, slowly. "We'll do something for it," he said. "Retroactively." She squinted at him. "What does retroactively mean?" "Means late, but on purpose." She considered this. "Okay," she said. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later in the person of Deputy Carla Munoz, who was 34 years old, recently promoted, and had the face of someone who'd been called out on a cold night and was trying to determine in the first 30 seconds whether this was a genuine emergency or a paperwork situation. She came in alone, which was either good instinct or thin staffing, and she scanned the room with the professional efficiency of someone doing rapid triage. She saw the child first, then the 3 men. Then her face did a small recalibration. Cole stood. He introduced himself with his full name, which he almost never did, and he said former military, and he said the child appears to be a missing person, and he said the name Emma Voss, and he watched Deputy Munoz's face change in a specific way, not dramatically, but in the way of someone who has just heard a name that means something. "Emma Voss," Munoz repeated. "Yes." Munoz looked at Emma. "Hi, sweetheart." Then to Cole, "Can I see the envelope?" Cole handed it to her. She read through the contents standing at the table, and her professional expression held until she reached the placement document, at which point something moved behind her eyes that she didn't entirely succeed in controlling. "I need to make some calls," she said. "We know," Cole said. "I'm going to need you all to stay here." "We know that too," Dutch said. Munoz looked at Dutch, at his prosthetic, at his face, at Reyes coming back from the far end of the diner. She was performing her own rapid calculation, and Cole could see it happening. These are not ordinary civilians. These men have specific histories. This situation is more complex than a standard child welfare call. And to her credit, she didn't let the calculation make her defensive. She just adjusted her operating assumptions and moved forward. "The child stays with you," she said to Cole. It was phrased as an order but functioned as a recognition that Emma was not going to sit with a stranger. "Yes," Cole said. Munoz went to the far end of the diner and made her calls. Emma had been watching this exchange with the careful attention she brought to everything, and when Munoz was gone, she looked at Cole and said, "Is she going to send me back to Gerald?" Cole looked at her. He could have said no immediately. He could have made the reassurance quick and clean and easy. He chose not to because Emma Voss was a child who had been lied to by people who held authority and had learned to identify the specific hollow sound of a fast answer. "I don't think so," he said, "but I'm going to be honest with you. She has to follow rules, and some of those rules were written by people who didn't know about that document. So tonight might be complicated." Emma looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You're not going to leave?" It wasn't a question. "No," he said, "I'm not." She nodded. She pulled the backpack back into her lap. She didn't say anything else. The next hour was the kind of hour that moved through different textures. Deputy Munoz made calls that led to more calls. A second deputy arrived, young, male, uncomfortable with the situation's ambiguity, and stood near the door with the body language of someone who'd been told to be present and hadn't been told what for. Dutch ordered more coffee and hash browns and ate with the unhurried calm of a man who had learned in very specific circumstances that food was tactical and that refusing it on principle was wasteful. Reyes sat with his notebook and wrote things Cole didn't ask about. Cole sat with Emma. She fell asleep against his shoulder at some point around 1 in the morning. Not a slow drift, a sudden drop into unconsciousness, the way severely exhausted children sleep, as though the body had simply decided it had reached its operating limit and shut down without consultation. Her head was heavy against his arm and her breath came out slow and even, and Cole sat very still and didn't move and thought about the gray car and the man named Gerald and the placement document with the county seal and tried to build a complete picture from the available pieces. The picture he built was worse than the one he'd started with. Dutch had moved to the seat across from them and was watching Cole with the particular expression he wore when he was thinking about something he hadn't decided yet whether to say. "What?" Cole said quietly. "Nothing." "Dutch." Dutch looked at the table, then at Emma's sleeping face, then at Cole. "You're already in it," he said. "You know that." "Yeah. I mean past where you can step out clean." "I know what you mean." "I'm not saying it's wrong," Dutch said carefully. "I'm just saying it's a thing that's happening, and you might want to be conscious of it." Cole looked at him. "I've been conscious of it since the parking lot." Dutch nodded slowly. He picked up his coffee, set it down. "Reyes found the name," he said. "Emma Voss. 11 months missing. Parents listed as Sarah Voss, mother, and the father is deceased." He paused. "The father died 8 months before Emma went missing. Car accident. Ruled accidental." Cole processed this. "And the mother?" "Listed as whereabouts unknown. The original missing person report was filed by a caseworker named Patricia Hollins out of the Dawson County office." Dutch paused again, and this pause had a different texture, the texture of someone about to place something on the table that would change the shape of the conversation. "Patricia Hollins resigned from Dawson County 6 weeks after filing that report. She moved out of state. Reyes is trying to find a current contact." Cole absorbed this in silence. "Cole," Dutch said. "I hear you." "The caseworker who filed the report is gone. The mother is gone. The placement guardian has a county document with his name on it." He leaned forward slightly. Whoever put that document together had access to county systems. That's not a one-man operation. Cole looked at Dutch. The fluorescent light above them buzzed at a frequency that was just slightly wrong, and the window beside them showed a rectangle of pure black, the parking lot beyond, the mountain beyond that, the whole dark geography of a night that had started as just another stretch of highway and had become something with structure and weight and specific malevolent intention. "I know," Cole said. "So we're not talking about one guy in a gray car," Dutch said. "No. We're talking about a system." "Yes." Dutch sat back. He was quiet for a long moment, and the quality of his silence was the quality of a man making a decision that he'd already made but was being honest with himself about the cost of. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay," Cole said. Deputy Munoz came back to the table at 1:40 in the morning with the expression of someone who had just had a conversation that had complicated her understanding of the situation considerably. She looked at Emma sleeping against Cole's arm. She looked at Cole. "The placement document is registered in the county system," she said, low. "Gerald Pruitt is listed as a licensed foster guardian." "We know," Cole said. "That means I have a legal problem," she said. "We know that too." "Mr. Vance?" She stopped. She had the look of someone choosing their next words with the specific care of a person who understood that what they said next was going to live somewhere. "That document doesn't necessarily mean what it appears to mean, but until we can challenge it through proper channels, my hands are limited." "How limited?" Cole said. "I can't transfer custody of a child away from a legally designated guardian without—" "He abandoned her in a parking lot," Cole said. His voice was still quiet. Emma didn't stir. "In 11 degrees, barefoot." "I know," Munoz said, and the weight in those two words was real. "Which is why I am not currently making any phone calls to Gerald Pruitt's listed contact number. But I need you to understand that by morning, if someone else makes that call—" "Nobody is making that call," Reyes said from across the table. Munoz looked at him. Reyes looked back. The thing that happened between them wasn't threatening. It was the meeting of two people who both understood that a line existed and were each assessing where the other one stood relative to it. "I have a job," Munoz said. "So do we," Reyes said. She looked at Cole. "I'm going to need somewhere secure for her tonight, not here." She looked around the diner. "Somewhere I can list in my report as a safe temporary location that I personally verified." Cole looked at Dutch. Dutch said, "I know a place." The place was a property 40 minutes south, a ranch-style house set back from a county road owned by a woman named Margaret Okafor, who was 61 years old, a retired family court advocate, and a member of the Ironbound Brotherhood's extended network in the specific way that certain people become connected to certain groups, through shared history, through mutual aid, through the particular gravity that formed around people who consistently did the right thing in situations where the right thing was inconvenient and expensive. Margaret had been called by Reyes somewhere in the second hour. She'd answered on the first ring, asked 2 questions, and said she'd have the guest room ready and the driveway lit. Getting Emma to the vehicle without waking her was an exercise in very careful logistics. Cole ended up carrying her, which felt like carrying something terrifyingly light and terrifyingly important, and he walked through the cold to Dutch's truck. Dutch had trailered his bike and driven the truck down from Casper because Dutch was 60% logistics and 40% fury in human form, and settled Emma in the back seat with his jacket over her. She woke up once during the transfer, opened her eyes in the cold air and looked up at Cole's face directly above her and said, "You're still here," in a voice that was mostly sleep. "Still here," he said. She closed her eyes again. Cole rode in the back with her. Reyes took his bike. Dutch drove. Nobody talked. The mountain road unwound ahead of the headlights, the tree line close on both sides, and Cole sat in the dark of the truck cab and watched the road and let himself feel, for the first time since the parking lot, the full weight of what the night had become. Margaret Okafor was exactly what Reyes had implied. A small woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the matter-of-fact competence of someone who had spent decades in rooms where children's lives were being decided and had learned to operate without panic in any of them. She took one look at Emma and made up a bed with sheets that smelled of lavender and didn't ask Cole anything beyond the essentials. When Emma was settled, genuinely asleep this time, in a real bed in a warm room, Margaret made coffee, and the four of them sat at her kitchen table. "Pruitt," Margaret said. She said it the way people say a word they've tasted before and not liked. "You know him?" Cole said. "By reputation. Dawson County had a placement scandal 4 years ago, a cluster of children going to guardians who weren't properly vetted. It was investigated. The investigation resulted in one mid-level caseworker losing their license. The system otherwise continued." She looked at her coffee. "Patricia Hollins filed that missing person report as an act of conscience. She was gone in 6 weeks. Reyes is trying to find her," Cole said. "Don't," Margaret said. Everyone looked at her. If she moved and changed her contact information, she did it for a reason. Approaching her without preparation could put her at risk. She paused. "Let me make that contact. I know how to do it quietly." Cole looked at Dutch. Dutch shrugged. The shrug that meant she knows more than us about this particular territory. "Okay," Cole said. "How long?" "Give me until morning." The morning came slowly and gray through Margaret's kitchen windows. The kind of winter morning that didn't so much arrive as accumulate. Darkness becoming less dark. The tree line resolving out of the murk, frost on the glass catching the first flat light. Cole had not slept. Dutch had slept 2 hours in the armchair in the living room with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to extract rest from any available surface. Reyes had been at the kitchen table since 3 in the morning with his notebook and his phone. Cole was standing at the kitchen window with his third cup of coffee when Reyes said, "Cole?" He turned. Reyes had his phone on the table, screen up. On it was a photograph, a screenshot, clearly captured from a public records database of some kind. A headshot photo. A man in his late 40s, broad-faced, with a particular carefully maintained presentation of someone who understood that appearance was a form of argument. Beneath the photo was a name and a title. Gerald Allen Pruitt, Associate Director, Dawson County Division of Family Services. Cole looked at it. He looked at Reyes. "He's not just a foster guardian," Reyes said. "He's inside the system. He helped build the system he used to take her." Cole set down his coffee cup. He did it carefully because his hands were not entirely steady, and he didn't want them to be unsteady anywhere that anyone could see. "How many kids?" he said. Reyes was quiet for a moment. "I don't know yet. The placement records I can access from outside aren't complete. But the network he's using, the county seals, the authorization documents, that's infrastructure. You don't build infrastructure for one child." The word infrastructure hit Cole somewhere below the ribcage and stayed there. "I need the full picture," Cole said. "It's going to take time." "How much time do we have before Pruitt realizes she's not retrievable through the gray car and starts making legal moves?" Reyes picked up his pen. "If he has access to county systems, he could flag her as a runaway or a transfer case and generate paperwork that gives him grounds for a recovery order." He paused. "Realistically? 24 hours before he escalates to something official." Cole walked to the window again. Outside, the sky was getting lighter in the way of winter skies. Reluctantly, the light colorless and thin. His breath fogged the glass. Behind him, he heard Dutch wake up. The specific sound of a man in his 50s getting out of an armchair, which involved a sequence of protests from multiple joints, and come into the kitchen. "What did I miss?" Dutch said. "Pruitt runs the county division," Cole said, without turning from the window. A pause. "Of course he does. Reyes thinks we have 24 hours before he goes legal. Then we need a lawyer." "We need more than a lawyer," Cole said. "We need someone inside the system who hasn't been bought." He turned from the window. "We need Hollins." Dutch looked at Margaret's closed bedroom door. She said morning. "It is morning," Cole said. Dutch went and knocked. Margaret answered in under 10 seconds, fully dressed, which told Cole she hadn't slept either, which told him she understood the timeline the same way he did. She came to the kitchen, poured coffee without speaking, and sat. She looked at Cole. "I reached out," she said. "There's a channel. It's slow, and it has to be slow because the alternative is dangerous." "We may not have slow," Cole said. "I know." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "Patricia Hollins is alive. She is in contact with at least 2 other individuals who left Dawson County under similar circumstances. They have documentation." She looked at Cole with the direct gaze of someone delivering information that has weight and wants you to feel the weight. They have been building a file for 16 months. They were waiting for something they could bring to an honest prosecutor without getting it buried. Cole processed this. They need Emma. They need Emma as a living witness to Pruitt's direct custody. Without her, everything they have is institutional misconduct. With her, it becomes something with a face. She paused. And they need someone outside the county system to hold her while the legal process moves. Cole looked at her. That's us. That's you, she said. Specifically, a licensed guardian willing to go through the court process. She set down her mug. That means a petition. That means evaluations. That means putting yourself in front of a family court judge, which means your entire history becomes a document. The kitchen was quiet. Dutch was looking at the table. Reyes was looking at his notebook. Cole was looking at Margaret, and Margaret was looking at Cole with the expression of someone who had laid out the full cost of a thing and was waiting to see whether the person in front of her understood it completely before they answered. Cole had a history that was not simple. He had a discharge that was honorable but qualified. He had a sealed file from the JAG office that contained the details of an incident in a village in a province with no civilian name, and while the incident had been reviewed and closed, it existed, and family court record searches were thorough. He had no fixed address. He had no employment history that fit in a standard box. He had a motorcycle, a storage unit in Laramie with his worldly possessions, and 19 years of riding with men who scared people when they walked into rooms. He also had Emma Voss sleeping in the guest room down the hall, who had set her backpack on a table in a diner at midnight and said, "I'm tired of being the only one who knows." "Okay," he said. Dutch looked up. Reyes looked up. Margaret looked at him. "You understand what you're agreeing to?" "Yeah," Cole said. "I understand." "They will look at everything." "Let them look." Margaret studied him for a moment. Then she nodded once, the nod of someone crossing an item off a list and moving to the next one. "I'll start the petition paperwork today. We'll need character witnesses." "I've got 12, Dutch said. "You'll need people who will appear in court." "I've got 12, Dutch said again. Exactly the same tone. Margaret looked at Dutch. Something shifted in her expression. Not surprise exactly, but a species of recognition, as though she was seeing a thing she'd theorized about and was now observing in practice. "All right," she said. That was when Cole's phone rang. The screen showed a number he didn't recognize. Area code 307. Wyoming, same as Dutch, but not a contact. He looked at it. Looked at Reyes. Reyes gave a small nod, and Cole answered. The voice on the other end was a woman's. She was trying to sound controlled and not quite succeeding, and beneath the control was something that Cole recognized immediately and viscerally. The specific sound of a person who has been afraid for a very long time and has not had anywhere to put it. "Is she okay?" the woman said. "Please." "Is she okay?" Cole's hand tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "My name is Sarah," the woman said. "Her name isn't Lily. You already know that. Please, just tell me she's okay." Cole looked at the kitchen door, down the hall, at the closed guest room door at the end of it. "She's okay," he said. "She's asleep. She ate last night. She's warm." A sound on the other end of the line that was not quite a sob and not quite a breath, but somewhere between the two, and Cole had to close his eyes for 1 second because the sound of it was one of the most difficult sounds he had encountered in 38 years of difficult sounds. "I need you to listen to me very carefully," Sarah Voss said, "because they're already moving. Gerald knows she's been found, and he knows she's with someone outside the system. He has a judge." She paused. The pause was tight with controlled terror. "He has a judge who will sign an emergency custody order by 8 this morning. You have less time than you think." Cole looked at the clock on Margaret's kitchen wall. It was 6:47. "Sarah?" he said carefully. "Where are you calling from?" "That doesn't matter right now, "It matters," he said, "because if you're somewhere that can be traced, you've just told him exactly where to look for additional leverage." A silence. Then, "I'm on a burner. I've been on burners for 8 months." "Okay," he exhaled. "Okay, tell me about the judge." His name is Aldrich Fenner, she said. Family court, Dawson County. He's been on Pruitt's cases for 3 years. Every placement Pruitt has requested, Fenner has approved. Every challenge that's been filed, Fenner has dismissed. Her voice was steady now. The steadiness of someone who had been rehearsing this, who had been holding this information like a coal in their hands, waiting for someone on the other end of a phone to finally be the right person to give it to. Cole, I don't know your name, but the person who gave me this number said you were the right person. You need to understand. This isn't just Pruitt. Fenner is part of it. The county director above Pruitt has been part of it. This is not something you can fight at the county level because the county level is the problem. Cole looked at Reyes. Reyes was already writing. I need names, Cole said. I have names, Sarah said. I have dates. I have documentation I've been building for 8 months. I have 3 other parents, 2 mothers and a father, who lost children to this system and can't get them back because every legal challenge goes to Fenner. I have... She stopped. When she came back, her voice was different, stripped down, the control giving way to something rawer underneath. I have a daughter who spent 11 months with a man who should be in a cell, and I was not able to get to her, and I need you to understand that I did not leave her. I need you to know that. I left the documentation with her because I couldn't get her out, and I needed someone to know the truth. But I never left her. Do you understand? I understand, Cole said. Tell her, Sarah said. When she wakes up, tell her I never left. Cole looked at the hallway, at the closed door. I'll tell her, he said. He hung up. He set the phone down on the table. He looked at Dutch and Reyes and Margaret, and the 4 of them sat in the kitchen of a house on a county road in the gray winter morning, and for a moment nobody spoke. Then Dutch said, We need to move her. Yes, Cole said. Fenner will issue the order at 8. Anyone with a county connection who knows Emma is here. Munoz, Cole said. The word landed. Deputy Carla Munoz had been exactly what she appeared. A professional trying to navigate a complicated situation within legal constraints. She had not been hostile. She had not been corrupt, as far as Cole could read, and he was generally good at reading that. But she had a case file. She had a location she'd verified and listed in her report. And if Gerald Pruitt had a contact inside the sheriff's department, not necessarily Munoz herself, but someone with access to last night's incident report, then Emma's current location was a document in a system that might already be compromised. Cole stood up. How fast can you move her without a paper trail? He asked Margaret. Margaret stood up. Faster than you'd think, she said. We need to be gone in 30 minutes, Reyes said. He was already on his phone. Cole walked down the hallway to the guest room door. He knocked softly. No answer. He opened the door carefully. Emma was awake. She was sitting up in the bed with his leather jacket across her lap. She'd pulled it over herself at some point in the night, and she was looking at the window where the gray winter light was coming through the curtain, and her expression was the expression of someone who had woken up in an unfamiliar room and taken a moment to remember how they'd gotten there, and had then remembered everything and was now sitting very still with that knowledge. She looked at Cole when he came in. We need to go, he said. I'll explain in the truck. She got up. She moved with a speed and lack of complaint that told him this was not the first time someone had said, we need to go in the early morning hours, and the familiarity of it made his jaw tight. She picked up the backpack. She looked at him. My mom called, didn't she? She said. Cole stopped. He looked at her. You have a different face than before, Emma said. When someone tells you something about me, your face changes a little. It changed when the lady cop came. It changed again just now. She looked at him steadily. She called. Cole crouched in front of her so they were at eye level. Yes, he said. She called. Emma's face did something complex and very fast. A sequence of emotions moving across it like weather across a landscape. Too quick to catalog, but visible in the way that significant things are visible, even when they pass quickly. Then it settled. Is she okay? Emma asked. She's trying to be, Cole said. She asked me to tell you something. Emma looked at him. She said she never left you, Cole said. She needs you to know that. Emma looked at him for a long time. The winter light came through the curtain and caught the side of her face, and she was so small and so composed and so thoroughly damaged and so entirely present, and Cole looked at her and felt the specific thing he'd been riding away from for 11 years move through him, and he did not move away from it this time. He let it land. Emma said, "I know." Then she said, "Can we go?" They left in the next 20 minutes. Dutch's truck, Reyes on his bike, Emma in the back seat with Cole in his jacket and the backpack on her lap. The county road was empty in both directions. The sky was lightening by degrees, the cloud cover low and dark at the edges, in the way that meant more snow before noon. Cole's phone showed 6:59 when they turned onto the state highway and headed south. At 7:12, Reyes's phone buzzed. He read the screen from his bike via the earpiece connected to Dutch's truck radio, and his voice came through the cab speaker with the flat delivery of someone reporting facts in a situation where emotional delivery was a luxury. "Emergency custody order just cleared," Reyes said. "Signed by Judge Aldrich Fenner, Dawson County Family Court, 6:58. Cole looked at the time. 6:58. 2 minutes before they'd hit the highway. 2 minutes. "They went to the diner first," Reyes continued. "2 deputies. Munoz wasn't one of them." A pause. "They have the location of the secondary residence, Margaret's property. ETA to her address, approximately 22 minutes. Cole looked at the road ahead. Looked at Emma, who was looking at him, who had heard all of it through the cab speaker and whose face had gone very still and very focused. "They have a judge's order," she said. "Yes," Cole said. "Can they make you give me back?" Cole looked at her. Outside the window, the mountain fell away to the east, and the highway curved south through a corridor of dark pines, and the Harley's engine behind them was a steady presence in the winter air. The thing was, he didn't know the answer to that question with legal certainty. He didn't know whether what they had, Sarah's names, Reyes's research, Margaret's connections, the letter in the envelope, was enough to outrun a signed order from a sitting family court judge. He didn't know whether the attorney Margaret was going to contact would be fast enough. He didn't know whether Patricia Hollins's 16 months of documentation could be weaponized in time, or whether the machinery that had been running long enough to take Emma Voss and change her name and lose her mother and build an entire scaffolding of institutional legitimacy around the whole enterprise was going to prove faster and stronger than 9 people in a kitchen at dawn. What he knew was that he was done making the choice that was easy instead of the choice that was right. He had made the other choice once, 11 years ago, and it had cost him 11 years of highway and sleeplessness and the specific hollowness of a man who had outrun something without ever being able to leave it behind. He looked at Emma Voss, and he said the most honest thing he had said to anyone in 11 years. "I don't know, but I'm not letting them." She looked at him. Then she looked at the road ahead through the windshield, the highway unrolling south into the mountains, the sky heavy with snow that hadn't fallen yet. "Okay," she said. And then Dutch's phone rang through the cab speaker, a number Cole didn't recognize, a Wyoming area code, and Dutch answered it, and the voice that came through was a woman's, clipped and precise and cold with controlled fury. And she said, "My name is Patricia Hollins, and I have been waiting 8 months for someone to call me, and I need you to tell me exactly how much you know, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change the size of what you think you're dealing with." The truck moved through the mountains. The snow began, and the road ahead disappeared into the white. Patricia Hollins's voice came through the truck speaker with the compressed urgency of someone who had been rehearsing this conversation for 8 months and was now delivering it under conditions she hadn't anticipated. Moving vehicle, strangers, a timeline that was already bleeding out. "How much do you have?" she said. "Give me the inventory fast." Reyes answered from the bike through the earpiece relay because Reyes had the inventory. The placement authorization document, Sarah Voss's letter, photographs, Pruitt's County title, Fenner's case history, 3 years of approvals, 2 vehicle plates from last night, a witness. He paused. "The witness is 6. A silence on Hollins's end that lasted exactly 3 seconds. "She's alive," Hollins said. Not a question. A statement delivered in a tone that suggested the alternative had been something she'd been sitting with for a long time. "She's alive," Reyes said. Another silence, then, "Where are you heading?" "South on State Route 9, Dutch said. "We need a position that isn't in a county database." "I know a place," Hollins said, "but I need 30 minutes to make it safe. Don't stop moving until I call back." She paused. And don't use the same route twice. If Pruitt has a department contact, they'll be looking for a truck and a motorcycle heading south. Understood, Cole said. Dutch took the next county road east without being told. The truck rocked on the uneven surface, and Emma braced herself against the door with one hand, backpack in the other, and said nothing. She had been saying nothing for several miles with the specific quality of a child who was processing things at full capacity, and had correctly identified that adding words to the situation was not her job right now. Cole watched the side mirror. Empty road behind them, the pine corridor dark on both sides. The snow coming in flat and thin, not heavy yet, but building the way mountain snow built, methodically, without drama, until it was everywhere. He counted the seconds between his heartbeats. It was an old field habit, a way of measuring how far adrenaline had pushed his system, a way of reminding the body that it was still in charge of itself. His heartbeat was not slow. Dutch drove with the competence of someone who had driven worse roads in worse conditions with worse things on the line, and he drove without speaking, and the truck moved east through the mountains with Reyes behind them, a single headlight in the side mirror, steady. Hollins called back in 22 minutes. Take County Road 14 north until you hit a green water tower, she said. Turn left, half a mile, there's a gravel track. The property at the end belongs to a man named Victor Sines. He's expecting you. Don't knock. The garage will be open. Who is Sines? Cole said. Former Dawson County public defender, Hollins said. He left 18 months ago. He left because of the same reason I left. A beat. He's been building the same file I've been building. We just didn't know about each other until 4 months ago. Cole and Dutch exchanged a look. How many of you are there? Cole said. More than you'd think, Hollins said. And less than we need. She hung up. The green water tower appeared 10 minutes later, a rust-streaked cylinder against the gray sky. And Dutch turned left, and the road became gravel, and then the gravel became a track through snow-covered ground, and the trees opened into a clearing where a garage sat behind a low house, both structures dark, except for a rectangle of yellow light at the garage's open door. Dutch killed the headlights before pulling in. Reyes came in behind and shut his engine down, and the silence that followed was the particular silence of people who had made a decision to trust something they couldn't fully verify yet, and were now standing at the edge of that decision. Victor Science was waiting inside the garage. He was 57, compact, with the kind of stillness that came from having spent decades in courtrooms where the cost of visible agitation was a verdict. He had dark circles under his eyes that looked structural rather than circumstantial, the permanent marking of someone who had been sleeping badly for a very long time. He looked at them as they came in. He looked at Emma last, and when he looked at Emma, something happened in his face that he didn't try to hide. A brief, raw movement of relief so intense it was almost painful to observe in someone that controlled. I've seen her photograph for 11 months, he said. Not to anyone in particular, just said it, into the garage air, among the smell of motor oil and cold concrete and the particular mineral smell of mountain snow being tracked in on boots. She's real, Emma said. Science looked at her. Yes, he said. You are. He had a space heater running in the corner and a folding table set up with a laptop and several accordion folders of documents and a coffee maker that was working hard. He had, notably, no phone visible, and Cole clocked that and filed it. The man operated on the assumption that phones were traceable, which was either paranoia or expertise, and given the rest of what this morning had produced, Cole was leaning expertise. Dutch settled Emma at a chair near the heater with the last of the coffee from the maker and a blanket from the truck, and she sat with the backpack in her lap and watched everything with her dark, focused eyes. And nobody told her not to listen, because at this point there was no version of not listening that served anyone. Science opened the first accordion folder. Tell me what Hollins told you, he said to Cole. She told us you had a file, Cole said. I have more than a file, Science said. He laid 3 documents on the table. I have the original placement authorization chain for Emma Voss. I have a parallel chain for 6 other children, all processed through Fenner's court, all through Pruitt's office, all in the last 4 years. He put his finger on the 3rd document. And I have this. Cole looked at it. It was a financial record, a bank statement, partially redacted but with enough visible to be legible. The account holder name was listed as a numbered LLC. The deposit column showed regular transfers, monthly, in amounts that were not large enough to flag automatically, but consistent enough to constitute a pattern. The originating account reference showed a routing number. "Where does that routing number go?" Cole asked. Sayence looked at him. "That's what I've been trying to confirm for 4 months," he said. "I can get it to a county account, a specific discretionary fund managed by the Family Services Division." He paused. "The fund that Pruitt administers." Reyes, who had been standing at the edge of the table, said, "He's paying himself through the placement system." "Not just himself," Sayence said. He pulled another document. Fenner's financial disclosure for the last 3 years shows a consistent supplemental income source listed as consulting fees. The LLC that pays it is registered in a state with minimal disclosure requirements. He looked at Cole. The same LLC appears in 4 other placement chains, 4 other judges in 3 other counties. The garage was very quiet. Outside, the snow had thickened and was tapping against the metal roof in a sound that was almost delicate. "This isn't a county operation," Cole said. "No," Sayence said. "How far does it go?" Sayence sat down. He put both hands flat on the table and looked at them, and Cole had seen that particular gesture before it. The gesture of a person about to say something they've been carrying alone for a long time and have not yet said out loud to anyone because the act of saying it made it more real and more dangerous simultaneously. "I found a reference in a federal contractor database," Sayence said. "The LLC that runs the payments has a parent company. The parent company has federal contracts." He looked up. "Child welfare consulting contracts. 3 states. The contract language includes language about placement optimization and family court liaison services." He stopped. "I think this is a business. I think Pruitt and Fenner are franchise operators." Cole stood very still. "How many children?" Dutch said. His voice was quiet in a way that was more frightening than if it had been loud. "Across 3 states, using the placement pattern I've identified?" Sense picked up a piece of paper with numbers on it. "Conservative estimate, 40 to 60 children in the last 4 years. Those are the ones I can trace. The ones I can't trace." He set the paper down. "I don't know." Nobody spoke for a moment. Emma, from her chair near the heater, said quietly, "Were they all like me?" Sayence looked at her. The question had a specific weight, the weight of a child asking whether her experience had been singular or systemic, whether she had been uniquely targeted or whether she was one item in a ledger, and both answers were terrible in different ways. "We don't know yet," Sayence said, and he said it with the honesty of someone who respected the child enough not to soften it. Emma nodded once. She pulled the blanket tighter. She didn't say anything else. Cole walked to the far side of the garage. He needed a moment of vertical space between himself and the table, and Dutch, who read him, gave it to him by beginning to talk to Sayence about documentation chains, filling the room with content so that Cole's movement looked purposeful rather than reactive. Cole stood near the wall with his back to the room and took 3 slow breaths and let the full architecture of what he'd just heard settle into a shape he could operate from. 40 to 60 children. A parent company with federal contracts. A judge, a county official. A legal apparatus designed specifically to route children through a system that looked exactly like child welfare and functioned as something else. And somewhere in that system, Emma Voss had spent 11 months as a number in someone's ledger, while her mother went underground and a caseworker named Patricia Hollins lost her job, and a public defender named Victor Sayence left his county and began building a paper record of something that would have destroyed both of them if it had been found too soon. He turned around. "What do you need to take this federal?" he asked Sayence. Sayence looked at him steadily. "A witness I can put in front of a federal judge, a chain of custody for the documents that can't be challenged, and a prosecutor above the county level who hasn't been compromised." He paused. "That last one is the problem, because the federal contract means someone at a higher level approved it." "FBI?" Reyes said. "Possibly, but if this involves federal contracting money, there may be DOJ interest. The question is who inside DOJ can be trusted with the initial contact." Sayence looked at his hands again. I've been trying to make that contact for 4 months without exposing what I have before I know who I'm handing it to. Margaret Okafor, Cole said. Saenz looked up. You know Margaret? She's the one who put us here, Cole said. She said she knows how to make contacts quietly. Something shifted in Saenz's face. A small reorganization, the look of a man who has been working a puzzle alone for a long time and has just had someone hand him a piece that fits. Margaret and I overlapped in family court for 6 years, he said. She filed more successful challenges against bad placements than anyone I've ever worked with. He picked up his phone. A different phone from the one he hadn't shown them, Cole noticed, a second device retrieved from a drawer, and began composing a message. Reyes was back at the documents. Cole moved to the table and stood beside him. The two of them looked at the financial record together, and Reyes traced the deposit pattern with one finger without touching the paper, tracing in the air above it. Monthly, Reyes said. Consistent amounts. Never a round number. Always slightly irregular. Classic structuring to avoid pattern flagging. They knew what they were doing, Cole said. They've been doing it long enough to get good at it, Reyes said. He looked at Cole. Which means they also know how to move fast when something goes wrong. He kept his voice low enough that it didn't carry to Emma. Fenner signed that order at 6:58. Pruitt would have requested it before 6, probably in the middle of the night. That means the moment he saw police at the diner, he started making calls. He didn't wait to see what happened. He escalated immediately. Because he's done this before, Cole said. Because he has a protocol, Reyes said. When a placement is compromised, there's a procedure. Move fast. Get legal cover first. Recover the asset before anyone can get to a prosecutor. The word asset landed between them like a dropped tool. Metallic, ugly, exactly right. Cole looked at Emma across the garage. She was looking back at him. She had heard the word and she knew what it meant in context because she was, as he had established in the first hour of knowing her, significantly more intelligent than adults tended to credit, and she held his gaze with the steadiness of someone who had already accepted the ugliest version of what her situation was and was not going to pretend otherwise. He held her gaze back. He did not look away first. Dutch came to Cole's elbow. We've got a problem, he said quietly. Cole looked at him. Munoz, Dutch said. She filed her report at 2 this morning. She listed 2 locations, the diner and Margaret's address. She listed the individuals present by name. He paused. Your name is on that report, Cole. Your full name. And your bike registration is on file with the state. Cole absorbed this. So Pruitt knows exactly who has Emma. He knew within an hour of Munoz's filing, Dutch said, which means by the time we left Margaret's, he already knew who to go after. He held Cole's gaze. He's not just trying to recover Emma. He's going to try to discredit you before the petition can be filed. Your sealed file, I know, Cole said. If he has a contact with JAG Access, I know, Cole said again, harder. Dutch stopped. Cole turned away from the table and walked to the garage door and stood in the opening, the cold air hitting him full in the face, the snow coming down in thin, near horizontal sheets now. He stood there for a moment with his jaw set and his hands in his jacket pockets, and the cold working into the scar on his jawline the way it always did when the temperature dropped. The sealed file contained the details of the incident in the province with no civilian name. It contained the after-action review that had cleared Cole of wrongdoing, but had documented, in precise military language, the nature of the circumstances and the nature of the call he'd made, and the fact that a child had been present in the area and had not been found in the subsequent sweep. It contained testimony from 3 other members of his unit, all of which supported him. It also contained the assessment of the reviewing officer, who had used the phrase emotionally compromised decision-making under extreme conditions, and while the review had concluded that Cole had operated within acceptable parameters, that phrase existed in a document, and if someone with access to that document wanted to use it in a family court context, it would do precisely what it was designed to do. It would make him look like someone who should not have custody of a child. He turned back. Saenz was watching him. You know about the file, Cole said. It wasn't a question. Saenz said, Margaret told me, before you arrived. And? And it's a problem, Saenz said. Fenner will use it, not in federal court, in the emergency custody hearing that Pruitt is going to file by end of business today to formalize Emma's return. Fenner will deny your petition before it's filed based on the military review. He paused. Unless we can get the emergency hearing moved to a different judge before Pruitt can file. Can we do that? There's one mechanism. A conflict of interest recusal request, filed by an attorney of record, with documentation of Fenner's financial relationship to the opposing party. Sands looked at the documents on the table. I have that documentation, but I need an attorney of record who can file it today, before the hearing. You're an attorney, Dutch said. I'm a disbarred attorney, Sands said. Dawson County pulled my license 18 months ago. Administrative grounds. I've been appealing for 16 months. The garage was very quiet again. The snow tapped on the roof. Cole said, Of course they did. Yes, Sands said. Reyes's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face didn't change, which was Reyes's version of a significant reaction. Patricia Hollins is 4 miles out, he said. She's been driving since before she called us. Nobody had time to respond to this before headlights moved across the garage opening. A vehicle coming down the track fast and then slowing as it came into the clearing. A dark, compact car with the kind of mud on the undercarriage that came from driving back roads in winter. It stopped. The engine cut. A woman got out. Patricia Hollins was 43 years old and looked simultaneously older and younger than that. Older in the eyes, which had the specific flattened quality of someone who had been vigilant for a very long time, and younger in the way she moved, which was quick and direct and without the accumulated physical hesitation that fear usually built into a body over months. She was dressed practically. Insulated coat, boots, no bag, just a hard-sided case under her arm that looked like the kind used to transport documents in conditions where documents needed protecting. She came into the garage and looked at Victor Science, and something passed between them. Not warmth exactly, but the recognition of two people who had been working parallel tracks toward the same destination and had arrived at the same coordinates simultaneously. Then she looked at Cole, then at Emma. She stopped. Emma looked at her. Hollins set the case on the table. She crossed the garage and crouched in front of Emma the way people who are good with frightened children learn to do. Low, non-threatening, eye level, not reaching. I'm the person who filed the report, she said. When you first went missing, I'm the one who tried to find you. Emma studied her. Why did you leave? She said. Hollins held her gaze. Because they made it impossible to stay, she said. And because I could do more from outside than I could from inside a system that had already been decided. She paused. I'm sorry it took this long. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, did you know my mom? I met her once, Hollins said, when I was processing the original file, before I understood what was happening. She stopped. When she came back, her voice was careful and honest in the way that told Cole she had decided to give Emma the truth in full, rather than the managed version. She was the person who first made me suspicious. She came to my office and she told me something was wrong with the placement, and I told her to follow the formal process, and she looked at me. She looked at me like she already knew the formal process was what they were counting on her to use. Hollins paused. I went back to my office and I started looking at the files, and 2 weeks later I was called into my director's office and told I was under review for procedural violations. She looked at Emma steadily. Your mother saw it before I did. She was right and I was slow, and I'm sorry. Emma looked at her for a long moment. Cole, watching from across the garage, saw something in Emma's face, some small internal adjustment, some recalibration of a thing she'd been holding in a particular position for a long time. She's smart, Emma said. She is, Hollins said. Emma nodded once. Then she looked at Cole, and the nod continued in his direction. A small gesture that meant something he couldn't fully translate, but understood in its general direction, which was something like, this one is okay. Hollins stood and came to the table and opened the hard case. Inside were documents in labeled plastic sleeves, organized with the precision of someone who had understood from the beginning that how the information was packaged was going to matter as much as what the information was. She laid 6 sleeves on the table beside Science's documents. I have the original placement authorization trail for 11 children, she said. I have the internal communications from the Dawson County Director's Office in the 8 weeks before I was reviewed. I took photographs before I left, which I understand was technically a violation of administrative policy, and I am prepared to address that if it becomes legally relevant. She looked at Reyes. I have financial records connecting the LLC to a federal contractor entity registered in Delaware. And I have testimony chasad, written, signed, notarized, from 2 other former Dawson County employees who will appear before a federal grand jury. Cole looked at the table, at the documents from Science, the documents from Hollins, the photographs Reyes had taken, the letter from Sarah Voss, the placement authorization with the 4 handwritten words in the corner. He looked at the shape of it all, the accumulation, and he felt something that was not relief but was adjacent to it, the specific sensation of pieces forming a structure large enough to be load-bearing. "We can take this federal," he said. "We can take this federal," Hollins confirmed. "But we need 2 things." She looked at Cole. "We need Emma safe and outside Fenner's jurisdiction for the duration of the federal process, which means the emergency hearing cannot happen in Dawson County." "What's the second thing?" Cole said. Hollins looked at him. She had the look of someone who had rehearsed this moment and in the rehearsals had not found a way to make it less difficult. "We need Sarah Voss," she said. Cole looked at her. "She's the primary witness," Hollins said. "She has the direct knowledge of Pruitt's conduct. She made the original complaint that triggered my review. Without her testimony, everything we have is circumstantial and institutional, compelling but not sufficient to override the emergency custody order in a federal venue." She paused. "We need her in person, before the hearing." Cole pulled out his phone. He looked at the burner number Sarah had called from. He looked at Hollins. "If she's been on burners for 8 months because she knew Pruitt had tracking access through the county system." "She did know that," Hollins said. "She told me when she called me 6 months ago. She'd been warned." She paused. "By a Dawson County IT employee who was also terminated 6 weeks after the warning." Cole counted. That was 4 people gone from the system in connection to this case. Hollins, Science, the IT employee, and Patricia Hollins's original director, who according to Science's documents had retired abruptly 14 months ago and had since moved to a state with no extradition agreement for administrative misconduct. He was counting people who had been removed from positions of oversight, and the count was going up. He called the burner number. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. A generic automated message, no name, no identification. He didn't leave a message. He looked at Margaret Okafor's number instead and called that. Margaret picked up on the second ring. "I heard from Victor," she said immediately. "I'm working the federal contact." "I need you to reach Sarah Voss," Cole said. "You're the one she trusted enough to get me the number. You're the one who has a channel to her that's outside the county infrastructure." A pause. "Cole, I know what I'm asking," he said. "If she surfaces, she's in danger." "Yes," Margaret said. "But if she doesn't surface, we lose the federal angle, and Fenner's order stands, and Emma goes back through a system we now know is compromised at multiple levels." He stopped. He looked at Emma across the garage, who was looking at him, who was tracking his half of the conversation with the focused attention of someone who understood that the conversation was about her mother and about her future, and had decided to meet that understanding straight on rather than sideways. "Margaret, tell her that Emma is safe. Tell her Emma ate eggs last night and hash browns and had a blanket and slept." He paused. "Tell her Emma said she knows." A longer pause. "I'll reach out," Margaret said. "I can't promise she'll come." "I know," Cole said. He hung up. He turned back to the table. That was when Dutch's phone rang. Dutch looked at the screen. Something moved across his face. A small involuntary contraction around the eyes that Cole had seen before and associated with news of a specific category. Dutch answered and said nothing for 15 seconds except yes and understood. And then he hung up. He looked at Cole. "The sheriff's department just issued a bolo," he said. "Black truck, Wyoming plates. Individual in custody of a minor child without legal authorization." He paused. "They have a description of Reyes's bike." Reyes stood up from the table. "It came from inside the department," Dutch said. "Not Munoz, someone with access to her report who called it into the duty sergeant as a potential child abduction." The word abduction hit the garage like a physical thing. Cole felt the specific cold that came not from temperature, but from understanding. The machinery was now running in reverse. The system that was supposed to find missing children had been activated to locate Emma and return her to the person who had taken her, and the legal language framing that action made Cole the criminal. "How much time?" Cole said. "Depends on how many people Pruitt has in the department," Dutch said. "Could be an hour, could be less." Cole looked at Science. "Is there anywhere in the county that has jurisdiction over emergency family court matters outside Fenner's bench?" Science was already thinking. "There's a federal magistrate in Hartwell," he said, 70 miles south. "She handles federal matters, but she has emergency jurisdiction over state child welfare cases if federal interest can be demonstrated." He looked at the documents. "The federal contracting connection is enough to demonstrate federal interest." "Barely, but enough." "Can you make that argument?" "I'm disbarred," Science said. "Can you make that argument?" Cole said again. Science looked at him, then at the documents, then at Emma, sitting near the heater with the blanket and the backpack and the patient devastating steadiness of a 6-year-old who had learned that the world moved in ways she could not control and had decided the only reliable response was to stay very still and watch very carefully. "Yes," Cyan said, "but I need someone to file it, an attorney of record." Holland said, "I passed the bar in 2 states." Everyone looked at her. "I'm a licensed attorney in Montana and Colorado," she said. "I worked as a caseworker in Wyoming because the salary was better, but I have an active license." She paused. "I can file." Sands looked at Hollins. Hollins looked at Sands. Something moved between them that was not complicated. It was the very simple recognition of 2 people who had been trying to do the same thing from different angles and had just found the angle where they overlapped. "Then we go to Hartwell," Cole said. "Now." "The truck is on a BOLO, Dutch said. "Reyes takes Emma," Cole said immediately. He looked at Reyes. "Your bike isn't on the BOLO yet. They have a description but not the plate. Take the county road south, not the state highway. Do you know the route?" "I'll find it," Reyes said. "I'll go with them," Holland said. She looked at Emma. "I'm not a biker, but I have a car that isn't in any of their systems." Cole looked at Emma. "Can you ride with Ms. Hollins and Reyes?" Emma looked at Reyes, then at Hollins. The calculation she ran was visible and quick. "Will you be there?" she said to Cole. "I'll be right behind you," he said. She looked at him for one more second. Then she stood up, pulled the backpack on, and walked to Hollins with the decisive movement of someone who had made their decision and was done deliberating. "Okay," she said to Hollins. "Let's go." Hollins looked at Cole over Emma's head. In her eyes was something that Cole recognized as the specific relief of a person who had been carrying a weight alone for a very long time and had just been given help, and the relief was complicated by the awareness that the thing wasn't over and might not end well, but the not-aloneness of it was itself significant. She nodded once. She took Emma's hand and they went. Reyes followed. At the garage door he paused and looked back at Cole. 70 miles south, he said. "I'll be there." "I know," Cole said. The sound of 2 engines, the compact car and Reyes's Harley, diminished through the falling snow and was gone. The garage held Dutch and Cole and Cyan's and Hollins's hard case of documents and the specific silence of a space that had been full of people and urgency and was now just cold air and the smell of motor oil and the thin tapping of snow on metal. Science was packing documents with the swift, organized motions of someone who had done emergency document transport before. Dutch was by the garage door looking at the track that led back to the county road, and his posture was the posture of a man who was watching for something he expected and did not want. Cole's phone rang. Unknown number. No area code he recognized. He almost let it go. He answered it. The voice was a man's. Controlled. Deliberate. The voice of someone who had made many calls like this and had learned that the first 30 seconds were the ones that mattered. "Mr. Vance," the voice said. "My name is Gerald Pruitt." Cole stopped breathing for exactly 1 second. Then he breathed again, slow, and said nothing. "I think we should talk," Pruitt said, "before this becomes something that damages everyone involved, including Emma." Cole looked at Dutch. Dutch had turned from the door and was reading Cole's face. Cole pointed at Science and pointed at his ear. "Listen." And Science came close. "I'm listening," Cole said. "You're a reasonable man," Pruitt said. "I've read your file, your service, your—" A slight pause. "Your history." The pause had been surgical. He'd paused on history specifically, let it sit, let Cole hear what he was not quite saying. "I think you understand that situations like this are more complicated than they appear from the outside. Emma's case involves a complex family situation. Her mother has documented mental health history. The placement authorization is entirely legitimate." "Is it?" Cole said. "The documents you've been given by Sarah Voss were assembled by a woman who is under a mental health order in Dawson County," Pruitt said. "Issued 6 months ago. It's a matter of public record. I can send it to you right now." Cole said nothing. "Emma is a child in an unstable situation," Pruitt said. "Whatever you think you're protecting her from, the reality is that you are currently the individual standing between her and a legal placement that the court has authorized. If this goes where it appears to be going, you will be arrested for custodial interference. Your sealed military file will be opened in family court, and Emma will go through a legal process that will take months, during which she will be in temporary state custody, not with you, not with anyone you choose, but in the state system." He paused. "That is not good for Emma." He was describing a real scenario. It was a scenario Cole had already thought about, had already looked at from every angle, had already found to be a thing that could happen and would be terrible if it did. "What do you want?" Cole said. "I want you to bring her to the Dawson County Family Services office by 2 o'clock today," Pruitt said. "I want you to cooperate with the transfer. I want you to walk away from this cleanly, with your file sealed and your freedom intact." He paused. "And I want you to understand that this offer expires at 2 o'clock, after which Judge Fenner issues an arrest warrant." Cole looked at Dutch. Dutch's face was stone. Cole looked at Science. Science was looking at his documents. He held up one finger, a single gesture, pointed at one specific document in the pile. Cole looked at it. It was the financial record, the LLC, the routing number. Science's finger traced to the bottom of the page to a notation Cole hadn't looked at closely before. A name, buried in the account registration detail. A name associated with the LLC's registered agent. Cole read it again. The registered agent for the LLC that paid Gerald Pruitt and Judge Aldrich Fenner and 3 other family court officials across 3 states was a company called Meridian Child Welfare Solutions, and its primary federal contact, the name listed as account authority on the federal contracts, was a senior official in the Regional Department of Health and Human Services office. The name was Aldrich Fenner, Jr. The judge's son administered the federal contracts that paid the judge. Cole stood in the garage with Pruitt's voice in his ear, and the snow on the roof and the cold working through the walls, and he understood completely and finally the full shape of what he was standing inside. It was not a corrupt county official and a compromised judge. It was a design system, a vertical integration of corruption from the county level to the federal contracting level, with a family name connecting the private benefit to the public authority that was supposed to provide oversight. It had been built carefully. It had been running for years. And it would continue to run if what he had on this table couldn't reach someone above the level of everyone it had already purchased. "Mr. Vance," Pruitt said, "are you still there?" Cole looked at the document, at Science, at Dutch. "Yeah," Cole said. "I'm here." "Have you considered what I've offered?" Cole made a decision. Not the easy one. Not the safe one. The one that was right. "I want you to listen to me very carefully," Cole said, "because I'm only going to say this once." He kept his voice completely level. "I know about Meridian. I know about the HHS contract. I know about Fenner Jr." He paused. "And I have the documents." The silence on Pruitt's end lasted 4 seconds. Long enough to be a real silence, not a tactical one. Long enough to tell Cole that whatever Pruitt had expected from this call, it had not been that. When Pruitt spoke again, the controlled deliberateness was still there, but underneath it, something had changed. A new tension in the register, the specific shift of a man reassessing a situation in real time and not liking what the reassessment was producing. "You don't know what you're holding," Pruitt said. "I know exactly what I'm holding," Cole said. Another silence. Then Pruitt said very quietly, You should think very carefully about what happens to people who hold things like that without the protection to go with them. Cole looked at Dutch. Dutch was already moving toward the bikes. I've been thinking about it since 6 this morning, Cole said. Here's what I've decided. He looked at the table one more time. At the documents, at the photographs, at the accumulated record of a machinery that had been eating children and calling it care. I'm going to Hartwell. I'm going to walk into a federal magistrate's court with everything I have, and you are going to spend the rest of your life wishing you had picked a different parking lot. He hung up. Dutch said, He's going to make calls. Yes, Cole said. To people above the county level. Yes. Which means whoever answers those calls is going to know that we have the Meridian connection. Dutch looked at him. Cole. If Fenner Jr. is the federal contact, that means there are people inside the federal system who have a reason to want this buried. Cole picked up the documents, handed half to Sands, who had his case ready. Then we need to get to Hartwell before Pruitt's calls go through. He looked at Dutch. How fast can you ride? Dutch looked at him with the expression of a man who had ridden through 3 combat deployments and 2 major storms and 1 very bad night in Nevada that neither of them ever discussed, and who had exactly one answer to that question regardless of the conditions it was asked in. Faster than they can make calls, Dutch said. They went out into the snow. The bikes were cold but alive, and Cole's Harley caught on the second kick, the engine's voice rising into the winter air like something that had been waiting, and he pulled out of the garage onto the track without looking back. Behind him, Dutch followed. Saenz's car came last, headlights cutting the gray. The county road was empty. The snow was coming harder now, the world narrowing to the corridor of visibility ahead of the headlights, and Cole leaned into it and opened the throttle and let the cold hit him full and absolute in the face. 70 miles to Hartwell. Pruitt was already on the phone. The federal machinery was already being activated by people who understood what the Meridian connection meant and what its exposure would cost them. And somewhere on a county road south of here, Reyes and Hollins and Emma were making the same run in a car that nobody was looking for yet. The gap between yet and now was everything. Cole pushed the Harley harder, and the engine answered, and the snow closed in around him, and the road disappeared into the white ahead. And he rode into it without slowing, because there was no version of slowing down that ended with Emma Voss in a place that was safe. And he had told her he would be right behind her, and in 11 years of breaking things, he had made a practice of keeping exactly one kind of promise, the kind he made to children who had run out of reasons to trust anyone. He was not going to be one more reason. The snow hit Hartwell at 11:43 in the morning, and it hit hard. Not the thin mountain dusting from earlier, but the real weight of a winter system that had been building since dawn, the kind that turned highway signs into white rectangles and reduced visibility to the length of a car hood. Cole came into the town limits with ice on his jacket, and his face numb from the jaw down and his hands working the throttle on feel, because his fingers had stopped registering sensation somewhere around mile 40. He didn't stop. Behind him, Dutch was a single light in the white. Behind Dutch, Science's car. The formation had held for 70 miles without radio contact because radio contact was traceable, and the only thing that mattered now was arrival. Reyes's text had come in at mile 55 through the helmet speaker. Here, parking structure west of courthouse. Hollins filing now. Emma with me. 3 sentences. Everything Cole needed. He found the federal courthouse by the flag, the only color visible in the white, snapping in the wind above a gray stone building that looked like it had been designed to communicate permanence and authority and had succeeded at both. He came around the east side and found the parking structure and pulled in and killed the engine and sat for a moment in the sudden shelter of concrete walls while the roaring in his ears slowly became something he could think through. Dutch pulled in beside him. Then Science. Nobody spoke for 10 seconds. Cole pulled off his helmet. His hands were shaking slightly from the cold. Not from anything else, he told himself, and it was mostly true. Dutch was looking at him with the particular assessment of a man checking whether someone next to him is still operational, and Cole met the look and gave him a nod that meant functional, and Dutch accepted it. They found Reyes on the second level, beside a concrete pillar, his bike dark and cold. Emma was sitting on the ground with her back against the pillar, and Reyes standing in front of her. Not looming, not guarding in any visible way, just present, the way a certain kind of man is present in a situation, filling the space around something vulnerable without making the vulnerability feel like the point. Emma had the backpack in her lap. She was eating a granola bar that had appeared from somewhere in Reyes's jacket, and she was watching the parking structure's entrance with the steady attention of someone who had decided that watching the entrance was her job and was doing it seriously. She saw Cole come around the pillar, and something in her face changed. The very small change of a person who had been holding a particular tension without realizing it and released it at a specific moment. She didn't run to him. She wasn't that kind of 6-year-old anymore, if she had ever been. She just looked at him, and the tension released, and she kept eating the granola bar. "Hollins?" Cole said to Reyes. "Upstairs," Reyes said. "Filing room, 3rd floor. Science is on the phone with the magistrate's clerk." He looked at Cole's hands. "You need to get warm." "Later," Cole said. "Your hands are blue," Reyes said. "Later," Cole said. Reyes looked at him, then at Dutch, who shrugged with the expression of a man who had been telling Cole Vance to take care of himself for 19 years with approximately 0 success rate. Reyes accepted this and moved on. "Hollins has the filing ready. The conflict of interest recusal is the lead document. The federal contracting connection is the supporting material." He paused. "She's good. She knows exactly what she's doing." "What's the timeline?" Cole said. "The magistrate's clerk said she has a 2 o'clock docket." He checked his watch. "We have 57 minutes. "And Fenner's order?" "Still active," Reyes said. "Until the recusal is granted, the emergency custody order is legally operative in Dawson County, which means if a Dawson County deputy walks into this building—" "They don't have federal jurisdiction in a federal building," Cyan said, coming around the pillar, phone in hand. He'd arrived behind Cole without Cole hearing him, which said something about how much the cold had degraded his situational awareness, and was something he filed for later. "But the BOLO is still active statewide, and if Pruitt's contact inside the department has escalated to the state police—" "Has he?" Dutch said. Science looked at his phone. "Margaret just texted. State Police BOLO issued 11 minutes ago. Black truck, Wyoming plates. Individual with minor child." He looked at Dutch's truck on the level below, visible through the concrete gap. "Wyoming plates." Dutch said something under his breath that was quiet enough that Emma couldn't hear it, and accurate enough that Cole felt it in his chest. "Move the truck," Cole said. Dutch went. The truck's engine sound echoed up through the structure and then diminished as Dutch took it to another level or another block entirely. Cole didn't track it. He was already thinking about the 56 minutes and the filing room and the distance between where they were and where they needed to be. "Emma," Cole said. She looked up. "We need to go inside," he said. "Into the building. It's warm and it's a federal building, which means nobody from Dawson County can walk in and take you without a federal judge saying so." He crouched in front of her. His knees were cold and stiff, and the crouching hurt, and he did it anyway. "Are you ready?" She finished the granola bar. She folded the wrapper and put it in the outer pocket of the backpack with a tidiness that was completely incongruous with the circumstances and was somehow the most quietly devastating thing Cole had witnessed in the entire morning. Then she looked at him. "Is my mom coming?" she said. "Margaret is trying," Cole said. "I don't know yet." Emma accepted this. She stood up and pulled the backpack on. She looked at Reyes, who gave her a nod that was spare and serious, the nod of someone treating her like a person rather than a situation. She took Cole's hand, not clutching, not desperate, just a hand in a hand, deliberate, and they walked toward the courthouse entrance. The federal building's lobby was heated and fluorescent and staffed by 2 security officers who looked at Cole's face and his ice-crusted jacket and processed something in his bearing that made them ask for ID with a respect that was not required by the situation. Cole gave his name, and his military ID expired, but it still had the right effect on people who read it correctly. And he said the child was with him, and they were here for a family court emergency filing in the magistrate's docket. One officer looked at Emma. Emma looked back at him with the composure of someone who had been in situations where adults were deciding things about her and had learned that composure was the most powerful tool available to a 6-year-old. He let them through. They found Hollins on the 3rd floor in a corridor outside the filing room, and the first thing Cole saw when he came around the corner was Hollins, On her phone, with her jaw set and her free hand pressed flat against the wall the way people press against solid things when they need to stay steady. She saw Cole and held up 2 fingers, 2 minutes, and kept talking. Cole waited. Reyes appeared at the corridor's other end, coming from the stairwell. He shook his head slightly. No tail, clean entry. Hollins hung up. She looked at Cole, and her face had the specific controlled tension of someone delivering a status report that has both good and bad elements and is choosing how to sequence them. Filing is in, she said. The recusal request, the conflict documentation, the Meridian connection, the federal contracting chain. It's all submitted and on the magistrate's docket. She paused. The clerk confirmed the magistrate reviewed the preliminary filing. She's agreed to hear it at 2. That's the good, Cole said. Hollins looked at him. Pruitt filed a counter motion 20 minutes ago through a Dawson County attorney of record. He's arguing that Emma is a ward of the state under active county jurisdiction and that this court lacks standing to override the emergency custody order. She stopped. He also filed a motion in Lamine to exclude Sarah Voss's letter on the grounds of mental health documentation. The mental health order, Cole said. He mentioned it on the phone. It's real, Hollins said. I pulled the record while we were driving. It was filed 6 months ago by the Dawson County Mental Health Authority. The filing attorney was a county employee. She met Cole's eyes. The evaluating physician has a consulting contract with Meridian Child Welfare Solutions. Cole stood very still. They built a paper record to discredit her, he said. Yes, Hollins said, before she could surface, before anyone could use her testimony. She looked at Emma briefly and then back at Cole. If the magistrate accepts the motion in limine and excludes the letter, our evidentiary package is significantly weaker, compelling, but weakened. And Pruitt's attorney is good. He's going to argue that the Meridian connection is speculative without a direct witness who can testify to personal knowledge of the arrangement. We need Sarah, Cole said. We need Sarah, Hollins said. Cole's phone buzzed. Margaret. He answered. Tell me, he said. She's willing to come, Margaret said. She's been in the state for 3 days. She came when she heard Emma was found. She's been in a motel 40 minutes south of Hartwell under a name that isn't hers. A pause. Cole? She's fragile. She's been running for 8 months and she's running on almost nothing, but she's willing. Can she be here by 2? Cole said. If she leaves now, Margaret said, if the roads are passable. Cole looked at the window at the end of the corridor. Snow still coming. The road from 40 minutes south to Hartwell in this weather was a road that a woman alone in a motel room on 8 months of fear and almost nothing would have to drive herself because sending anyone to get her created a trail, and a trail was what Pruitt's contact at the state police was currently looking for. Tell her to come, Cole said. Tell her Emma is in the building. Tell her Emma is warm and safe and waiting. He hung up. He looked at the corridor, at the institutional ceiling lights and the scuffed floor and the American flag mounted at the far end, and he breathed. 40 minutes, and the roads were bad, and Pruitt's countermotion was on the docket, and whatever calls Gerald Pruitt had made in the hours since Cole had hung up on him had gone to people who had a reason to want this filing buried before 2 o'clock, and who had the authority and the reach to attempt it. The next 40 minutes were the gap, the space between what had been built and what it could do. Cole looked at Emma beside him. She was looking at the window, at the snow, with the stillness that he had come to understand was not passivity, but concentration, the specific focus of a person who was spending their available processing power on the one thing that mattered most to them. She's coming, Cole said quietly. Emma looked at him, then back at the window. I know, she said. At 1:27, Cole's phone showed a call from a number he didn't recognize with a Wyoming area code, and something at the base of his spine told him to answer it before the second ring. The voice was male, older, and it said, Mr. Vance, my name is Thomas Reardon. I'm a special agent with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. I received a document package this morning through a contact I'm not going to name. I've been looking at the Meridian contracting chain for 7 months from the federal side. I need to know where you are. Cole processed this in 1 second. How do I know you're who you say you are? he said. You don't, Reardon said. But I'm going to give you the name of the HHS official connected to the Meridian account, and you're going to tell me if it matches what you have. Go ahead, Cole said. Aldrich Fenner Jr., Reardon said. Regional Director, HHS, Mountain West Division. Cole exhaled one controlled breath. It matches, he said. Where are you? Reardon said. Federal Courthouse, Hartwell. Magistrate's docket at 2. A pause. Who filed? Patricia Hollins, active Colorado bar license. I know Hollins, Reardon said, and something in his voice shifted. Not warmth exactly, but the specific change of a man who has been working a problem alone and has just confirmed that the people on the other end of the line are real. The document package I received this morning came with a routing note that said, "For anyone who will listen." I've been looking for the origin of that phrase for 4 months. Cole closed his eyes for 1 second. Sarah Voss had written those words on the outside of the envelope. She had put them on the envelope she'd left with her daughter to carry into the dark. I know who wrote it, Cole said. Is she alive? Reardon said. She's 40 minutes south. She's coming here. A silence that lasted 3 full seconds. Then Reardon said, I can be in that courtroom by 1:55. I can present federal standing that supersedes the county jurisdiction argument, and I can tell the magistrate that the Meridian investigation is active at the federal level, which changes the evidentiary calculus completely. He paused. But I need you to hold the room until I get there. Whatever Pruitt's attorney throws at the 2 o'clock docket, you hold the room. We'll hold it, Cole said. He hung up and turned and found Reyes directly behind him, who had heard the entire call. Their eyes met. Neither of them said anything for a moment, because there was nothing to say that the look didn't already cover. At 1:49, the elevator at the end of the corridor opened and Dutch came out of it, and Cole knew from the way Dutch was walking, fast, focused, the prosthetic hand visible and swinging rather than pocketed, that something had changed in the building's external situation. 2 state police cruisers on the street, Dutch said, arriving at Cole's position without slowing. Not parked, staged, one at each end of the block. They can't come in without, Hollins started. I know what they can't do, Dutch said. But if Sarah Voss arrives at this building in the next 10 minutes, she walks past those cruisers to get to the front door. He looked at Cole. If Pruitt has her ID through the county mental health file, they'll stop her, Cole said. They'll stop her, Dutch confirmed. Cole looked at his watch. 1:51. Reardon at 1:55. Sarah at approximately 1:58 if the roads had held. The 2 o'clock docket. The window was 4 minutes wide and had a state police cruiser at each end. Side entrance, Sayan said. He had his phone up, showing the building's layout on a federal property database he had apparently had access to for reasons Cole didn't ask about. Loading dock, south side, no street frontage. It's a restricted access point, but with my credentials from when I was licensed. Do it, Cole said. Sainz went for the stairwell. Cole called Margaret. South side, he said when she answered. Loading dock entrance. Tell Sarah south side only. Do not approach the front of the building. He paused. Tell her there are people outside looking for her, but she's almost there. Tell her Emma is 1 floor up. I'll tell her, Margaret said. 1:53. Cole looked at Dutch. Dutch was looking at the elevator. His jaw was tight, and his right hand was in the specific position it went to when Dutch was ready to move in a direction that involved his physical body rather than his words. She comes through the south side, Cole said to Dutch. You're at the bottom of those stairs when she comes in. Nobody touches her before she gets upstairs. Dutch looked at him. And if someone tries? Cole looked back at him. The corridor light fell between them, and the snow was visible through the window at the far end, and the clock on the wall above the filing room door showed 1:54. Then you be exactly what you are, Cole said. Dutch turned and went for the stairs. 1:55. The elevator opened, and a man in a gray suit came out, 50s, built for endurance rather than size, carrying a leather case and moving with the deliberate pace of someone who had been in situations with this kind of clock before and had learned that urgency and haste were different things. He looked at Cole and said, "Reardon," and showed identification, and Cole read it, and it was real. "The magistrate's clerk is expecting me," Reardon said. He looked at Hollins. "You Hollins?" "Yes," she said. "The motion in limine on the letter," he said. "Can you counter it?" "If we have Sarah Voss in person, the letter becomes secondary," Hollins said. "Her live testimony supersedes the paper challenge." Reardon looked at Cole. "Where is she?" "Coming through the south entrance," Cole said. 1, maybe 2 minutes." Reardon looked at his watch, then at the door at the end of the corridor marked Magistrate's Court, room 301. Through the small wire glass window in the door, Cole could see movement. The shift of figures, a room coming to order. 2 minutes, Reardon said. "I can buy 2 minutes inside." He looked at Cole. "You hold the south side." He went through the door. Hollins followed. Cole looked at Emma. She was standing with Reyes, and she was looking at Cole, and in her face was the accumulated weight of everything. 11 months, 11 years, a parking lot in 11 degrees, a backpack with a letter inside it, a name that wasn't her name, a mother who had gone underground rather than leave her unprotected, and had spent 8 months on burner phones sending documents into the dark, hoping someone was listening. Emma looked at him. "She's almost here, isn't she?" she said. "Yes," Cole said. "Can I go down?" she said. "To where she's coming in?" Cole looked at her. He looked at the stairwell door. He looked at the window and the snow and the clock on the wall that showed 1:58. He took her hand. "Stay right with me," he said. They went for the stairs. The south entrance was a heavy fire door at the base of a concrete stairwell, and Dutch was standing at it with his arms crossed and his face doing the specific thing Dutch's face did when Dutch was prepared to be immovable, which was the same thing it always did, which was to say it showed nothing and meant everything. Science was beside him, holding the door's interior release. Cole heard it before he saw it. Footsteps on the concrete outside the door, quick and uneven. The steps of someone who had been running, or was very close to running, and had pulled themselves back to a walk for the last distance, because something told them that running into a federal building was not the entrance to make. The door opened. Sarah Voss was 31 years old and looked like someone who had spent 8 months becoming very good at being invisible. She was thin in the specific way of a person who had been eating functionally rather than adequately, and her hair was shorter than the photograph of her that Reyes had found in the missing persons file, and her eyes were dark and very alive in a way that was almost painful to look at directly, the aliveness of someone who had survived something by pure force of not looking away from it. She came through the door, and Dutch stepped aside, and Science let the door close behind her, and she looked at Dutch, and at Science, and at Cole, and then she looked down. Emma was standing at Cole's side, backpack on, one hand in Cole's, looking up. Sarah Voss stopped. In the concrete stairwell, under the fluorescent utility light, with the door sealed against the snow outside and the clock 2 floors above them showing 1:59, Sarah Voss looked at her daughter and made a sound that was not any particular word and was not designed for anyone else's ears, and Emma Voss let go of Cole's hand and crossed the 3 feet between them without running, in the deliberate way she did everything, and her mother went to her knees on the concrete and held her. Cole looked at Dutch. Dutch was looking at the wall. His right hand was pressed flat against it, the same gesture Margaret had used on the phone earlier, and Cole understood it now as the gesture of people who needed something solid when the moment was too much for standing without it. The clock showed 2 o'clock. "Sarah," Cole said quietly. He hated saying it. He said it anyway. "We have to go upstairs right now." Sarah Voss looked up at him from the floor. Her face was the face of someone who had just gotten the only thing they'd wanted for 8 months, and was being asked to stand up and go to work. She looked at him for 1 second, 2. Then she stood. She kept Emma's hand. She looked at the stairs. "Tell me what I have to say," she said. "The truth," Cole said. "All of it. From the beginning." She looked at him with the eyes of someone who had been telling the truth for 8 months to no one and was being asked to tell it now to the one room that could do something with it. "I've been ready," she said. They went up the stairs. Cole behind them, Dutch behind Cole, Reyes at the rear, Cyen's already pushing through the third-floor door ahead of them. The corridor was empty. The door to room 301 was closed. Through the wire glass, Cole could see Reardon standing at the front of the room, speaking, and Hollins beside him with her documents, and behind the elevated bench, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses, and the expression of someone who had been in her position long enough to have seen the full range of what people brought into her courtroom, and who was currently in the process of deciding what category this fell into. And at the respondents' table, a man in an expensive suit who had to be Pruitt's attorney, and who was watching the door with the specific attention of someone who knew something was coming through it, and had been trying to delay that arrival with every procedural tool available to him, and who was now watching the procedural tools run out. Cole reached past Sarah and pushed the door open. The room turned, and Gerald Pruitt's attorney looked at Sarah Voss standing in the doorway holding her daughter's hand, and the color left his face in the way color leaves a face when the argument you have been paid to make has just become impossible to make, because the living rebuttal to every word of it has just walked into the room and is looking at the judge. The magistrate looked at Sarah, at Emma, at Cole and the men behind him, at Reardon, at Hollins. She looked at all of it with the steadiness of a woman who had been a federal magistrate for 19 years and had developed, across those years, a very accurate instinct for the moment when a case revealed its true shape. She looked at the clock on the courtroom wall. 2:01. She looked at Pruitt's attorney. "Counselor," she said, "I'm going to need you to sit down." He sat down. The magistrate looked at Sarah Voss. "Ma'am," she said, "are you here voluntarily?" "Yes," Sarah said. Her voice was steady and clear and had in it the specific quality of someone speaking from the absolute bottom of what they know to be true. "I'm here voluntarily, and I'm prepared to testify to everything." The magistrate nodded once. She looked at the room, at the documents and the federal agent and the attorney and the woman and the child and the men in riding gear who had come in from the snow and were standing at the back of her courtroom with the quiet weight of people who had carried something a very long distance and had arrived. "Then let's begin," she said. The hearing lasted 4 hours and 11 minutes. Cole knew the exact duration because he watched the clock on the courtroom wall for most of it. Not from anxiety exactly, but from the particular hypervigilance of someone who had been running on adrenaline for 14 hours and whose nervous system had not yet received the message that the running was over. He sat in the back row with Dutch on one side and Reyes on the other, and he watched Sarah Voss testify, and he watched the magistrate listen, and he watched Pruitt's attorney attempt 3 separate procedural interruptions, each of which the magistrate dismissed with the efficient brevity of someone who had already made a preliminary assessment and was collecting confirmation rather than building from zero. Sarah Voss was extraordinary on the stand. Cole had expected fragility, 8 months of running, of fear, of near nothing. And what he got instead was precision. She spoke in chronological order. She named names and dates and document reference numbers from memory. The memory of someone who had spent 8 months with nothing to do but organize and rehearse the truth. When Pruitt's attorney challenged her mental health designation, she looked at the magistrate directly and said, "The evaluating physician has a consulting contract with the company that was paying the county officials involved in my daughter's placement. I can give you the contract number." The magistrate looked at Reardon. Reardon confirmed it in 2 sentences. The challenge died where it stood. Reardon's federal standing argument took 40 minutes and resulted in the magistrate issuing a temporary federal protective order placing Emma outside Dawson County jurisdiction for the duration of the federal investigation. Fenner's emergency custody order was suspended. The recusal of Judge Aldrich Fenner from all matters related to the Meridian connection was granted pending investigation by the State Judicial Conduct Board. Gerald Pruitt was not in the courtroom. He had not appeared in person, only through counsel. And at 3:47 in the afternoon, Reardon stepped outside the courtroom and made a call, and when he came back in his expression, told Cole everything before his words did. Pruitt was arrested at the Dawson County office at 3:32, Reardon said quietly. Fenner Jr. was picked up at his HHS office in Denver simultaneously. He paused. There are 4 other arrest warrants pending in 2 states. They'll be executed by end of business. Cole looked at the front of the courtroom where Sarah was sitting with Emma beside her. Emma's head against her mother's arm, Sarah's hand over Emma's hand on the table. The magistrate was completing her written order. Hollins was beside them, her documents organized back into their sleeves with the same precision she'd carried them in with, and her face had the specific exhausted relief of someone who had been doing a thing in isolation for a very long time and had just watched it work. Cole leaned back in the hard courthouse seat and closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then he opened them, because there was still paperwork. There was a great deal of paperwork. The guardianship petition took 3 weeks to formally process. Cole had understood going in that it would be complicated, and the sealed military file was reviewed by a family court evaluator appointed by the magistrate's office, a woman named Dr. Iris Chen, who was thorough and direct and who sat across from Cole in a small office in Hartwell for 2 hours and asked him questions that went to places he hadn't let anyone go in 11 years. He answered all of them. When she asked about the village and the girl and the call he'd made, he answered that too, in the full language of what had actually happened rather than the abbreviated operational version he'd been telling himself for a decade. He told her he didn't know what had happened to the girl afterward. He told her that not knowing had been the engine of 11 years of highway. He told her he understood that this was a thing he was going to carry, regardless of outcome, and that he had decided the carrying was not a reason to stop moving toward the right thing. Dr. Chen wrote for a long time after he finished speaking. Then she looked at him and said, "Mr. Vance, I'm going to recommend approval, not because your history is clean, because of what you did with it." The court date was on a Thursday in February, 5 weeks after the night at Harlan's Diner. It was cold but clear, the first genuinely clear day in weeks, the sky a hard winter blue that made everything look sharper than it was. Cole wore the same jacket he always wore. He didn't own anything else appropriate, and he'd decided that pretending to be something he wasn't in front of a family court judge was both dishonest and pointless. He walked into the courthouse alone. He walked out with guardianship papers, and Emma Voss's hand in his. Outside on the courthouse steps, the ironbound brotherhood was waiting. Not 2 bikes, not 3, 11. Parked in a row along the street with the engines off and the riders standing beside them in the cold, breath-coming white in the February air, leather and road, and the particular gravity of men who had come a long distance because one of their own had arrived somewhere significant, and it seemed right to be present for it. Dutch was at the center with his prosthetic hand visible, and his right hand in his jacket pocket, and his face doing what Dutch's face did when he was feeling something he wasn't going to say. Reyes was at the end of the row, arms crossed, notebook nowhere in evidence for once. Emma came down the steps beside Cole and looked at the row of bikes and the row of men and processed it with the focused attention she brought to everything. Then she looked at Cole. "Are those all your friends?" she said. Cole looked at them. At Dutch, who had driven 70 miles in a blizzard with a truck that had Wyoming plates on a state police BOLO. At Reyes, who had carried Emma on his bike through mountain snow with his body between her and the wind. At the others, men he'd ridden with for years. Men with sealed files and prosthetics and bad knees, and the specific damage that came from having been used hard by a country that hadn't always been ready to receive them when they came home. "Yeah," he said, "those are my friends." Emma considered this. Then she walked down the remaining steps and went to Dutch first, which was, Cole thought, exactly the right instinct. Dutch was the one who had ordered hash browns at 1 in the morning and asked if the eggs were good, and 6-year-olds remembered the things that mattered. She stopped in front of him and looked up, and Dutch looked down, and the moment between them was very brief and very uncomplicated. "Thank you for the hash browns," Emma said. Dutch said, "Retroactively." Emma almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a smile Cole had seen from her, a real one, and it arrived and departed quickly, but it had been real, and Dutch saw it, and something in Dutch's face shifted in a way that Cole had seen maybe 4 times in 19 years. Sarah Voss was not at the courthouse. She was in a federal safe house 40 miles north while the investigation moved through its phases. The testimony and the corroboration and the slow grinding machinery of federal prosecution working through the names on Reardon's list. She and Emma spoke by phone every evening. Cole listened to Emma's half of those calls from the kitchen, making dinner or cleaning up, giving her the space of the living room and the distance of ordinary domestic noise. And what he heard in Emma's voice during those calls was different from what he heard in her voice the rest of the time. Younger, less composed, more variable. the voice of a child who had a mother and was allowed to need her. He considered that a form of progress. The garage that Cole rented on the outskirts of Hartwell had a small apartment above it, 2 rooms, a bathroom, a kitchen that worked if you were patient with the water pressure. He put Emma's bed under the window that faced east because she'd mentioned once, without apparent significance, that she liked mornings better than nights, and east-facing windows made mornings come with light rather than alarm. He didn't own much furniture, and what he did own was functional rather than comfortable. And Emma looked at it all on the first day with the careful assessment of someone who had lived in places that were wrong in specific ways and was calibrating whether this one was wrong in those ways. She unpacked her backpack herself. She put 3 things on the shelf above the bed: a photograph of her mother, the school photo from the envelope with the gap-toothed smile, and a granola bar wrapper folded into a small, careful square. Cole didn't ask about the wrapper. Some things didn't need explaining. The porch light above the garage door was Cole's addition. He installed it the first week, a simple fixture with a motion sensor, and the first night it came on when Emma came home from the school enrollment meeting with Margaret, who had appointed herself something between a case manager and a grandmother figure, a role she performed with the same no-nonsense competence she brought to everything. Emma stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked up at the light. "It came on," she said. "Motion sensor," Cole said. "So it knows when someone's coming?" "Yeah," he said. She looked at it for another moment. Then she went inside. She didn't say anything else about it. But 3 nights later, when Cole came in late from a job he was picking up at a machine shop 2 towns over, Dutch had made a call, and the call had produced work, and work produced the income that the guardianship evaluation had flagged as a requirement. He came up the steps, and the light came on, and through the window he could see the kitchen light on, and Emma at the table with a book. And she looked up when the porch light triggered, and she looked back down at the book. And that was all. But the looking up had been deliberate, had been a check, had been the act of someone who was beginning to understand that the light meant something consistent, that the light meant he was coming back. Months passed. The federal prosecution moved at federal speed, which was slow and deliberate and heavily documented, and Gerald Pruitt remained in custody without bail, and Fenner Sr. was removed from the bench pending criminal charges. And Fenner Jr.'s federal contracts were frozen and then terminated, and then became exhibits in a grand jury proceeding. Patricia Hollins's Montana bar license became the basis of a new position with a child welfare advocacy organization that operated at the state level. Victor Syens's disbarment appeal was reviewed by a panel that included 2 members who had been following the Meridian story in the federal filings, and the appeal was granted in the 4th month, and Syens went back to practicing law, and the first case he took was pro bono and involved a placement irregularity in a county 2 states over. Margaret Okafor came to dinner on Thursdays. This was not formally arranged. It evolved the way things evolve when a person is consistently present at the right moments, and the household around them adjusts to expect them. She brought food because she distrusted Cole's meal planning, which was fair, and she and Emma did homework together at the kitchen table while Cole cleaned up, and the 3 of them existed in the specific companionable quiet of people who had arrived at a configuration that worked without anyone having planned it. Dutch called every Sunday. These calls were short and covered practical matters: work, bikes, the ongoing negotiations of the Brotherhood's operational calendar, and occasionally, at the very end, Dutch would say, "How is she?" and Cole would say, "Good," and Dutch would say, "Good," and hang up. And this exchange was the full extent of what either of them needed to say about it. Reyes sent a package in the 3rd month. Inside was a notebook, blank, good paper, the same brand Reyes used himself, and a pen and a note in Reyes's precise handwriting that said "only," for keeping track of things that matter. Emma opened it, looked at the note, looked at the notebook, and put it on the shelf beside the photograph and the school photo and the folded granola bar wrapper. Cole saw her write in it sometimes in the evenings, the pen moving in the focused way she did everything, but he never asked what she wrote, and she never offered to show him. And that was exactly right. On an evening in April, 4 months after the courthouse steps, Emma came downstairs while Cole was working on the Road King in the garage below the apartment, the engine partially disassembled on the mat, The smell of oil and cold metal, and the particular clean smell of spring coming in through the open garage door. She came down in her socks and stood at the bottom of the stairs and watched him work for a moment. "Cole?" she said. He looked up from the engine. "When the investigation is done," she said, "and my mom can come out, is there room?" He looked at her. He looked at the garage, at the apartment above it with its 2 rooms and the east-facing window and the porch light above the door. He looked at Emma Voss in her socks on the concrete floor with her arms crossed against the April chill, watching him with the dark, steady eyes that had looked at him across a frozen parking lot 4 months ago, and calculated, in the specific, unsentimental way of children who have survived hard things, whether he was worth the cost of trust. "Yeah," he said, "there's room." She nodded once. She went back upstairs. He heard her socks on the steps, and then the quiet of the apartment above, and then the specific small sounds of someone moving through a space that had become familiar. The particular creak of the 3rd floorboard, the sound of the refrigerator opening, the click of the lamp by her bed. Cole looked back at the engine. He picked up his wrench. Outside the open garage door, the April night was cold, but different from the February cold, different from the December cold. It had given it, the cold of a world that was still working toward something warmer and hadn't arrived yet, but was on its way. Above the door, the porch light stayed on. It would stay on through the night, through whatever came next, through the investigations and the hearings and the long, careful work of building a life out of the wreckage of several others. Through the evenings when Emma wrote in her notebook, and the Sundays when Dutch called, and the Thursdays when Margaret brought food, and the occasional night when Cole sat on the step outside with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands, and looked at the dark road and felt the 11 years of it, felt the weight of the girl he hadn't been able to save and the girl he had, and let both of those things be true simultaneously without making one erase the other. The porch light was not a grand gesture. It was not a statement. It was simply a light above a door, motion-triggered, pointed at the steps where people came home. But in the particular vocabulary of people who had spent significant portions of their lives in the dark, a light that stayed on was the only promise that ever really mattered. It said, "This is where you come back to." It said, "Someone knows you're out there." It said, "No matter how far the road goes, or how long the night runs, or how cold the mountain gets before the morning, this door is here, and the light above it knows when you're coming, and it will be on when you arrive." That was enough. That had always been enough.